heavy and frequent showers with the risk of hail and thunder as well. And with lighter winds, those showers will be quite slow moving too. Temperatures again fairly disappointing for the time of the year, highs of 10 to 12 degrees. Now, as we head through the rest of Friday into the evening and overnight, we hang on to a fair few showers towards the east, some heavy and more persistent rain affecting the southeastern corner for a time as well, but turning drier and clearer across many central and western parts. Again, one or two mist and fog patches, and again turning quite chilly, with temperatures falling close to freezing below in one or two rural spots. But that sets the scene, though, for a fine start to the day across many parts on Saturday morning. We still hang on to a bit more cloud across the eastern parts of England, but elsewhere more sunshine to start the day, lighter winds as well, like I said, and through the day that sunshine continuing for many areas. As we head through the rest of the weekend, it will stay largely fine across most parts on Sunday and into the early part of next week. More in the west sunshine and temperatures warming up as well.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. I'll be with you for the next 3 hours. Here's what's on the agenda today. A sharp rise in diphtheria cases has been linked to young Afghans coming across the channel. Is it anything to worry about? I want to find out about that. In other news, Joe Biden, yes, he was in Northern Ireland yesterday. He's in the Republic of Ireland today, but he did make a little bit of a clanger. I'll show you all of that very, very shortly. And this is a concern for people, I think, as well, which is the startling rise into the millions now of people suffering from diabetes. Do we have to take a bit more personal responsibility with our health? I could do with losing a few pounds, couldn't I? And yes, it broke yesterday on this show. Meghan Markle will not be attending the coronation. Is she coronation chicken? Do you think she should have come? We went out and about earlier to see what the British public thought.
As if she could be there to be with the family, but yeah, probably just to stop any kind of conflict. She's probably making the best choice.
Well, there we go. What do you think? Make sure you get in touch. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News. Yes, get in touch. Let me know your thoughts on any of the topics you've just heard there. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Are you concerned about the rise in diphtheria cases being linked to Channel migrant crossings? Let me know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. The top stories on GB News today. The US President Joe Biden has been meeting with Ireland's Taoiseach Leo Varadkar in Dublin in the last hour. Mr Varadkar telling the President it was wonderful to have him back in Ireland. The leaders also praised each other's leadership in relation to the war in Ukraine. And earlier on today, he visited President Michael D. Higgins at his official residence, an armed guard on standby around the building in Phoenix Park to welcome the President. The two leaders took part in a tree-planting ceremony and then rang the ceremonial peace bell. Now, President Biden is due to address the Irish Parliament later on today. It's in the second of a three-day visit to the Republic of Ireland. And upon signing the visitors' book this afternoon, Joe Biden said he didn't feel like going home.
It's an honour to return, and I talk about returning again to the home of my ancestors, to celebrate the things that bind Ireland and the United States and recommit ourselves to peace, equity, and I think the most Irish of words used in my family was dignity and dignity. So, anyway, thank you all very much. And I'm not going home. I'm staying here. Isn't this an incredible place?
So, Joe Biden and Leo Varadkar on their way to Leinster House at the moment for the joint session of Parliament. They will bring you full coverage of that, of course, on GB News. In other news today, the Chancellor says the outlook for the UK economy is brighter than expected, despite new figures showing there was no growth in the month of February. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows a 0.4% decrease in gross domestic product from January. The services sector fell as well, the ONS blaming strike action by teachers and civil servants and a fall in fuel usage. The weather was also said to be responsible, but figures do show GDP grew 0.1% in the 3 months up to February, with the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, saying the UK is now definitely set to avoid recession. But the Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, says the government has failed to help people.
Well, the economy figures that came out today are very devastating. It shows that productivity and the growth in the economy has been completely flatlined, and we've seen that from the IMF that have said that they don't believe that's going to get any better this year. So that is having an impact on people. Energy bills are going up, their mortgages and rents are going up, their food prices are going up, and the government have failed to help families, which has a knock-on effect on the economy and growth, because if people haven't got money to spend, then that will affect, growth in this country.
Angela Rayner. Let's take you back to events in the Republic of Ireland, where, of course, the US President Joe Biden is visiting. You can see, if you're watching on television today, President Biden greeting a number of children who are going to give a demonstration of Gaelic sports. We understand they're going to be demonstrating hurling very shortly. And that Gaelic sports demonstration by young players will be held this afternoon. Joe Biden characteristically taking his time on this tightly planned schedule, which has fallen behind by about an hour or so, as he's thoroughly seems to be enjoying himself on his visit to Ireland. Then, of course, Leo Varadkar, you can see in the left picture there, will be escorting the US President over to Leinster House, as I said earlier, to the Parliament to address both houses for a short speech emphasising both his pride in Irish sports and, indeed, American support for the Good Friday Agreement. Keeping tabs on that visit for you throughout the day right here, GB News. Now, 8 serving and former Met Police officers have been found guilty of gross misconduct over discriminatory and offensive messages that they sent on a WhatsApp group. The officers, 7 men and 1 woman, were found to have sent sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic and disablist comments online. They also made offensive comments about Katie Price's son, Harvey's disability and his weight. During the 5th day of the hearing, the legal chair described the breach of standards as so serious it justified dismissal. Our reporter,
Paul Hawkins has the latest.
All 7 men and 1 woman found guilty of sending those messages, found guilty of gross misconduct. We're waiting to hear whether they are to be dismissed by the Metropolitan Police, who of course are going through this huge process of reassessing officers for conduct, not just about their criminality but also about their wrongdoing, all part of this process to try and re-establish Londoners' confidence and trust in the Metropolitan Police.
Let's take you back to events in the United States where Donald Trump, the former president, is currently facing questioning in a deposition in New York in a £200 million civil fraud lawsuit. The former president is accused of being part of a decade-long scheme to manipulate property values and his net worth to obtain loans and tax benefits. Posting on social media, Donald Trump said he would use the case to show what a great, profitable and valuable company I built. It comes ahead of the trial, which is scheduled to begin in October. Now, demonstrations have continued in France. On the 12th day of nationwide strikes there, hundreds of railway workers gathered at Paris's Gare de Lyon station to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to increase the pension age by 2 years to the age of 64. France-wide opinion polls show the majority of voters still oppose the reforms. And tomorrow, the Constitutional Council will decide whether or not the law can be applied. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Welcome along, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Loads to get through this afternoon. Let's get cracking. And we start with news that small boat crossings have led to a sharp increase in cases of a fatal disease in England. Scientists say the number of people diagnosed with diphtheria went up by more than 500% in 2022. There was an outbreak of diphtheria at the Manston Processing Centre late last year. Now, at the time, the Home Office said that the death of a migrant held there may have been caused by the disease. But I wanted a bit more information on this. Is it anything to worry about? And what can be done differently? OK, so Kevin Saunders joins me now, who's the former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. Kevin, thank you very much. Now, look, just in terms of when people arrive here from Calais, OK, or other parts of that French coastline there, is there any concern immediately amongst you guys that they might actually have something like diphtheria? And what can be done about that?
There will be now. Everybody that arrives is medically checked. So if anybody's under the weather, it's going to be identified pretty quickly. I think the numbers have gone up from 4 to 71. So it's not a massive number. And diphtheria is a disease that can be treated with medication fairly easily. The question, the more relevant question, I think, Patrick, is where are they contracting it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is it. And actually, you'll be pleased to know, Kevin, that immediately after you, I've got a doctor on who can explain maybe the way that diphtheria is contracted and how dangerous or otherwise it is to the wider public. I'm just going to read some of those stats now. So 1,100 migrants have crossed the Channel in the past week alone. And these figures on the diphtheria situation is that research shows that 97% of the patients with diphtheria were young Afghan males aged under 18 with unknown vaccination history. 73 cases of diphtheria reported in 2022, up from 12 the previous year. Now, as you can imagine, Kevin, it's led to some people saying, well, do we now need to have quarantine camps on arrival? What do you make of that?
No, I'm not sure that would actually work. If we identify somebody with diphtheria, they can be isolated and they can be treated. So that's not really a problem. You've got to remember, Patrick, that 86% of the UK population will have been vaccinated against diphtheria anyway. So it's not something that I would really think is going to get into the general population. It's interesting that these are Afghan males. I mean, I would assume that Afghanistan is not a country where we are vaccinating children against diphtheria.
Could you understand why there may well be some public concern, though, when it comes to if people arrive over here, there is some form of medical check taking place, yeah, but then they maybe are very quickly sent out into hotels and places like that around the country and then allowed to come in and out of those hotels. I wonder whether or not some people, ordinary members of the public, just may be concerned, really, about all of this.
I think when you mention an illness like diphtheria, it does set alarm bells going for the general public. But I've done a lot of research on it this morning, and the figures that I've seen from UK HSA don't really suggest that it is going to be a huge problem.
Kevin, just quickly on this. Sorry, just very quickly on this, Kevin, if that's all right. What kind of state do people arrive in when you see them on these boats and landing here originally? I mean, are a lot of them quite unwell if they've been living in squalid conditions in Calais?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. I know that's probably not the answer you really want, but it's
the answer, isn't it?
It's a mixture.
Yeah.
Some of them are rugby. What I would be more worried about, Patrick, is that people arriving in the UK that we're not intercepting, people that are missing border force, and there are a few. If they've got it, then it would be a little bit more of an issue.
Kevin, look, thank you very much. Kevin Saunders there, who is the former Chief Immigration Officer at the UK Border Force. Now, before I go to my doctor guest on this, to give you a little bit of reassurance, I think it is reassurance, actually, about the diphtheria sharp rise linked to the Channel migrant crossings. I'm going to take you to Paris now, you lucky people, although not, given what we're about to see. This is, yet again, more rioting and civil unrest in Paris. So what we're looking at now is protests. It's part of a nationwide day of protests in France against pension plans. So scenes a bit like this, massive in Paris. We are expecting there to be other outbreaks of civil unrest in other parts of the country as well. And for those people who are listening on radio, I'm going to describe the scene now. There appears to be plenty of people in the crowd wearing protective gear themselves, as well, of course, as the riot police. And there's a bit of a charge taking place at the moment. People may remember on this very show last week scenes similar to this. And what happened very quickly, and this is why we're going to be keeping a close eye on it, is that as soon as scenes like this happened, the French riot police got involved. There was tear gas, what looked to be tear gas anyway. There were things like smoke grenades. They also seemed a bit perfectly happy to use the batons. And the protesters themselves were setting fire to shop fronts and causing a whole load of damage. I'm not sure if we've got any sound on this clip at all at the minute. If we do, at some point, we might be able to just hear what it sounds like. Yeah, there we go. So we could just turn that up a bit and just maybe just get a flavour of what the atmosphere's like there. OK, so yeah, rather a lot of chanting. And there we go. Smoke grenade being deployed. So there's a bank of French riot police there holding a line in the middle of a street in Paris, and they have organised pretty quickly. They ran from one end of that street over to the other, and the crowd is really jeering, and it looks to me as though we're seeing a new wave of police, all with white helmets on and what would appear to me anyway to be bulletproof, stab-proof vests. Now, these police are being pushed back now by the crowd, who are starting to throw objects at them, little projectiles. Looks as though there are bottles being thrown. I'm just going to give a warning now to everyone that, of course, we don't know what we're about to see. Could well end up being quite a disturbing scene there, so bear that in mind as I look at one individual who looks like just a normal member of the public there, being led away with blood on his face, surrounded by French paramedics and French police as well, who are now being pushed back from that main road down a side street. And this does look, I've got to be honest with you, as though it could get pretty dangerous, this, because the area that they're trying to hold there is relatively small. They're backing away. Hopefully that camera pans round again soon and we can see the kind of main thrust of the action, but certainly at least one person there with what seemed to be a relatively significant head injury People are still gathering there. The police, again, there's just a standoff taking place. Just a reminder, actually, in all of this, what this is all about, actually, which is about the rising of the French pension age from 62 to 64, and people are very, very angry about it, saying, especially the people who work in the public services in France. And this time last week, we've had people who are the French rat catchers, believe it or not, the rodent detectives, as it were, throwing the carcasses of rats at a town hall in France. And today, members of the public are back out in force again. Just a reminder as well that this is a nationwide protest. We're just seeing this in Paris now. We'll bring more detail to you from around the country. But riot police are clashing with protesters in the French capital. And one thing that is fascinating about this protest, actually, is how widespread it is. Now, these pension reforms were not actually voted on by the people, clearly, but they were also not really given due diligence in the French Parliament and in the French political arena. It was kind of waved through by Emmanuel Macron, and people are saying that this is him behaving like a little dictator. But one thing that is fascinating about it is the absolute breadth of people and the vast strength of feeling from all corners. You've got your usual people, you know, trade unionists and students who are not happy about it. You've obviously got the people who are approaching pension age, but you've also got, frankly, just a lot of ordinary French people, the kind of squishy middle class who, certainly if you look at what would happen in Britain, really, you wouldn't necessarily see them out on the streets in force. I mean, when do you? But in France, that's not the case. And this is why I think Emmanuel Macron is particularly concerned by it all. But it's worth noting that this has been going on now, on and off, for at least 2 weeks, hasn't it? And it shows no signs of stopping. And we're just looking there at French police who are, well, it appears to me, pretty badly cornered, actually, on a high street in France, on a main street. And they've allowed themselves, certainly from the footage that we can see at the moment, they've allowed themselves to actually be surrounded by these protesters. Again, I just wonder if we can turn that volume up a little bit again on this now and just see if we can get a bit some of the atmosphere once more. I've got a feeling that this might be about to get a little bit nasty because those French police are all backed up against a wall of a building and they are surrounded. There's probably about a 30-yard gap between those French police and the protesters. It's very difficult for me to tell at the moment how many protesters there are. French authorities, I think, have just deployed a smoke grenade, or may well be tear gas. We'll have to wait and see what the reaction is from the crowd there. It does appear to be causing a little bit of a minor dispersal right in front of it, but there we go. Well, we're going to take you back to Paris throughout the course of this show as this scene develops, and hopefully we'll have a bit more information on that as well. Right, so that's Paris as it currently stands. Very much a standoff taking place there. OK, all right. Well, we are going to return now, though, to the story that we were leading the show with at the top of the show, which is something that I think, when you read the headline of it and you see the kind of surface-level detail, cause for concern, massive cause for concern. But is that really justified? And that is the story about a sharp increase in UK diphtheria cases that are being linked to Channel migrant crossings. Now, 97% of the patients with diphtheria were young Afghan males under 18 with unknown vaccination history. 73 cases. So, again, it's 73 cases. It's the reason why it's a sharp increase is because it's from such a low base. But I wanted to get a little bit of medical advice here right now, and I'm joined by Dr. Bharat Pankania, who is a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Dr. Bharat, thank you very much. When people read the headlines, I think they might be quite scared about all of this. They might have a migrant hotel in their community. They might be worried about it getting out into the wider community. How scared should people be, or not at all?
Not at all would be a good advice. Of course, we take care and precautions. Of course we do. We must do. But by and large...
Oh, we've lost him there, unfortunately. We'll get Dr. Bharat back up. Don't worry about that, we will. But it's important to say as well where this study has come from, and it's scientists at the European Society of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases. So it's a proper study for anyone who's out there thinking that it's absolutely not. And the new outbreaks across the continent over the last 12 months have been mostly linked to incoming migrants. So it's a Europe-wide study, and what they are seeing is that this is rising throughout the continent, and specifically in Britain now we've had 70-odd cases, 73 cases, and they have all been linked to, 97% of them have been linked to young Afghan men coming across the Channel. How do you feel about all of this, ladies and gents? believe that I can go back to Dr. Bharat Pankani now. There we go. Sorry, we lost you for a second. So, you were saying people shouldn't be worried at all about this because most of us will have been vaccinated.
We have a very good childhood immunization program. Furthermore, this is the beauty of our National Health Service, which is we are very, very integrated. The security agency works with the NHS, works with microbiologists, and that beautiful integrated system is what
OK, I'm going to have to just cut in, I'm afraid. Sorry, Dr. Bharat. Look, we are having signal problems with you, I'm afraid, and we can't hear what you're saying. So there we go. Dr. Bharat Pankani there. It's a shame that a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. But we got the gist, didn't we? So basically what he's saying is that there's no massive need for huge public fear or uproar, but it is a concern for people. I think it will be seen as a concern for people. It is an infectious illness, but there we go. Right, OK, so now we're going over to Dublin. We're going off to... I'm taking you to Paris, now I'm taking you to Dublin, where Joe Biden will address both houses of the Irish Parliament later on this hour. Biden has already met the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and the Irish President Michael D. Higgins. Now, Higgins went for a walk with Biden this lunchtime, but it wasn't the only thing they took for a walk, because there's that fantastically large dog there who initially seemed to be completely under control and everything was all right, and then he went a little bit tonto. Ah, there we go. Yes. Oh, fantastic stuff. And to be honest with you, that is one of the more exciting things to come out of this trip so far. Oh, anyway. Let's cross now to Dublin and speak to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, thank you very much. No dogs in tow. They say you should never work with children or animals. Unfortunately, you have got to work with me, but there you go. Darren, what's the latest from where you are?
Yeah, very good afternoon from what's changed to be quite a wet Dublin this afternoon. As you say, the Irish President has been meeting this afternoon with the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, Northern Ireland, the Good Friday Agreement, the restoration of Stormont very much on the agenda, but Ukraine too. Ireland, while obviously being pretty defiant in terms of its messaging on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is a neutral country, and thus it's not sent any arms to Ukraine. It has taken in lots of Ukrainian refugees. So that's been on the agenda today with President Biden. In the next 30 minutes or so, though the schedule is running somewhat behind, we are expecting President Biden to address, as you say, both houses of the Irish Parliament, the Oireachtas. Again, it will focus a lot on peace. It will focus a lot on the relationship between Ireland and America. Irish Joe, he's known as here. He's talked about coming home many times over the last couple of days or so. Clearly the images, I think, particularly from Aras and Uthron, the Irish President's residence today, will play well with particularly the tens of millions of Americans who see themselves as Irish Americans, if you like. And then tonight, a big slap-up dinner at Dublin Castle with the great and good here in Ireland, where President Biden will attend that a little later on. Much more informal today than yesterday, lots less politics and more the kind of sense of wearing the shamrock loud and proud. And President Biden clearly enjoying his time here. He does feel quite comfortable. He's been to visit quite a few times. And certainly a sense that this is the easier part, of you like, of his visit compared to the tightrope he had to walk yesterday in Northern Ireland.
Absolutely. Darren, thank you very, very much, and we'll bring everyone the latest as and when Joe Biden does address the both political houses there. Look, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor there in Dublin. Now, Joe Biden has had a relatively seamless trip so far, but he did produce one of his trademark gaffes last night. Now, later in the show, I will be playing you a little bit of a compilation of some of Joe Biden's greatest hits, if you want to call them that. But he was talking about his Irish rugby union team's famous win a few years ago over New Zealand, who are, of course, as we all know, known as the All Blacks. However, he managed to call them the Black and Tans, which was the nickname of the British soldiers who fought Irish rebels just over 100 years ago. Check this out.
See this tie I have with a shamrock on it? This was given to me by one of these guys right here. Was a hell of a rugby player, and they beat the hell out of the Black and Tans. Oh, God. It was
Yeah, not great, that joke. But anyway, we'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. So, in other news, Meghan Markle will not be attending the Coronation, which has allowed us to write that brilliant strap at the bottom there, Coronation Chicken. But has she done the right thing for a change? Or is she? Oh, yes, Coronation Chicken. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Loads more between now and 4 o'clock, but we're taking you straight back live to Paris, where we were a little bit earlier on. Protesters there in the street yet again, and there have been violent clashes between them and riot police, although it does look a little bit more sedate now, it's fair to say. But yeah, thousands of people out in the street, and we could earlier on see hundreds of police officers as well. This protest is moving through the street, and people are correct, by the way, in emailing in to me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and reminding me that it is not just about pension reforms taking place at the moment. Macron, of course, wants to raise the pension age from 62 to 64 and wants to do so really without it going through Parliament or anything like that. So that's what people are angry about initially. But there is also protest just generally about the French political system and its globalist nature as well. And all of these protests have been kind of wrapped up into one. So, yes, a lot going on. And as we can see there, a rather interesting image of Macron kissing Macron. And that's a good point, I think, for us to come away from Paris. So, we've got an exclusive report, very shortly, yes, on why Sir Keir Starmer is facing a backlash from within his own party. And later in the show, there's the story of the company that signed up a trans influencer and then saw $6 billion, that's right, $6 billion wiped off its value. Of course, also, we were out and about earlier on as well, worthwhile talking about this. We were out and about earlier on asking the great British public what they made of Meghan Markle swerving the coronation, OK? Is she coronation chicken, or has, actually, Meghan Markle done the right thing for once? Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'll go to those, the other side of the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour from GB News. US President Joe Biden has met with Ireland's Taoiseach Leo Varadkar in Dublin today. Mr Varadkar telling the President it was wonderful to have him back in Ireland. The leaders also praised each other's leadership in relation to the war in Ukraine. And earlier, Joe Biden visited President Michael D. Higgins at his official residence. An armed guard on standby around the building as the president walked in, and the two leaders taking part in a tree planting ceremony and ringing the ceremonial peace bell. President Biden is due to address the Irish Parliament later on today on the second of a three-day visit to the Republic of Ireland. Upon signing the visitor's book earlier on today, Joe Biden said he didn't feel like going home.
It's an honor to return, and I talk about returning again to the home of my ancestors, to celebrate the things that bind Ireland and the United States, and recommit ourselves to peace, equity, and I think the most Irish of words used in my family was dignity. And dignity. So, anyway, thank you all very much. And I'm not going home. I'm staying here. Isn't this an incredible place?
Joe Biden speaking earlier. Well, the Chancellor says the outlook for the UK economy is brighter than expected, despite new figures showing there was no growth in February. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows a 0.4% decrease in gross domestic product from January. The services sector fell, with the ONS blaming strike action by teachers and civil servants. A fall in gas and electricity usage due to milder weather was also responsible. Now, 8 serving and former Met police officers have been found guilty of gross misconduct over discriminatory and offensive messages they sent online. The officers, 7 men and 1 woman, were found to have sent sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic and disablist comments in a WhatsApp group chat. During the 5th day of the hearing, the legal chair described the breach of standards as so serious it justified dismissal. You with GB News, more news throughout the day. Now we'll have the finance report.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And here is how the numbers are stacking up today. The pound buying you $1.2517 and €1.1327. The price of gold, £1,634.39 for an ounce. The FTSE 100's at 7,831 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, let's get the latest ahead of the coronation and, in particular, of course, Meghan Markle's decision not to attend. After so much speculation, it was finally confirmed yesterday that while Prince Harry will be there, his wife will not be at the ceremony, which clashes with their son Archie's 4th birthday, which I think if I was 4 years old, going to a coronation might have been quite a nice present, but hey, different people. Harry has not been seen with the royal family since his bombshell memoir, Spare, was published. With me now is Cameron Walker, our royal reporter, who joins us from outside Westminster Abbey, where, of course, this coronation will take place. Cameron, lovely stuff. Thank you for joining us. Right, OK, so Meghan Markle is not going to be attending. We know that, don't we? What else do we know? What are the latest lines from today?
Well, Prince Harry is not going to be attending, as we already knew. Of course, it's a pretty turbulent time between the royal family and the Sussex camp. As you said, it is the first time that Prince Harry will see his extended members of his family since the bombshell memoir that he put out, and of course the Netflix series as well. I think the timings of the statements have been talked about today, though, because it was around 3 p.m. yesterday, Patrick, if you remember, that Buckingham Palace and the Sussex spokesperson put out a pretty similar statement, actually, saying that Prince Harry will be attending the coronation. The Duchess of Sussex will not be attending the coronation, which suggests to me some level of cooperation and coordination between the two camps after literally months of turbulence. And I think the Mail described this as transatlantic ping-pong in terms of the negotiations, delicate negotiations, as to whether or not Harry or Meghan would indeed attend the coronation. We now know, of course, that he is going to, but now, of course, there's all this speculation about the potential reconciliation between King Charles and of course his brother Prince William as well. I think both are slightly unlikely, maybe more likely with the King, but Prince Harry, as we understand it, is only having a very fleeting visit here to the United Kingdom for the coronation. He'll attend the service behind me in Westminster Abbey, but he's not going to be part of the ceremonial procession as we understand it. I doubt very much he'll appear on the balcony for the flypast following the service as well, because we understand that that's only going to be working members of the royal family. So he'll fly straight back to California to spend time with Prince Archie, which is of course his birthday. But although Prince William and Prince Harry are in the same room, I doubt there's going to be much reconciliation in front of a TV audience of 100 million people, as is predicted. But because all of this has clearly been put out there, it's just added fuel to the fire, hasn't it, in terms of this Sussex soap opera that we've got going on. But I think by putting out the statements 3 weeks before the big event itself, of course one of the most important events of the King's life, I think Buckingham Palace is hoping that the spotlight will be firmly back on the King and Queen consort come the 6th of May.
Absolutely. Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker there from outside Westminster Abbey, where the action will be taking place in about 3 weeks' time. Now, the inbox has been buzzing around this, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Janet says one word comes to mind about Meghan, along with one or two others, which I won't read, Janet. Coward, she says. Coward. I was asking whether or not you think Meghan is coronation chicken for not wanting to come to the coronation. However, there is some noise around that actually what this will mean is that there is a very good chance that there could be reconciliation between Harry now and the royal family. That's certainly what the Telegraph is leading on today. Certainly a relief for the King, etc. So we'll be dipping into that throughout the course of this show. Do you think that Meghan Markle has made the right decision? Now, later on as well, I'm going to be playing you some clips. We went out and about and spoke to the British public to get a range of views on where they stand about Meghan's non-attendance. But demonstrations are continuing in France on the 12th day of nationwide strikes. And we were showing you some footage earlier on from the scenes of the riots taking place in Paris. And I can go now to Paris, where Marie Chantrate, who's a political journalist with TF1, joins me. Thank you very, very much. Now, Marie, I appreciate you joining us. Now, just talk us through, so where are you? What's been going on around you?
Yeah, hi. I'm just close to the Élysée Palace, where Emmanuel Macron is living, and they were Minister Council this morning, and now he's talking with the President of the National Assembly and the Senate, because tomorrow is the D-Day for the French President, and we know if the pension law is going to be validated or not. So it's going to be a very important day tomorrow. Friday is a crucial day for French president and his government.
Absolutely. Now, why are people so angry?
Well, because of this pension law and the fact that now French people need to work until 64. And for majority of French people is not acceptable. So you can see this new protests. You said that's the 12th day of protests from the beginning of the year, and there are some violence too, quite high violence in Paris. And it's usual. We can see this scene in the street of Paris, and the policemen. And you can see here around the Élysée Palace, all the traffic has been locked down. No traffic at all, and the security has been reinforced because we see violent scenes around the Constitutional Council, and they threaten that protesters.
Can I just interrupt you quickly, because our viewers will be able to see on the right of their screen now French police there's fireworks exploding in the street now, and French police had just charged at protesters who charged back at them. There's now some distance between the French police, but you're looking at fireworks being blown up in the street. Marie, I'll get you to talk over this if that's okay. This looks like very, very concerning stuff, because we've seen violence erupting now and there's a charge going on. Marie, this could get quite nasty.
Yeah, actually, we're quite used of this kind of thing for many, many weeks now. So we are quite used of it. Policemen said that they are a little bit tired of this, but it's quite usual. So it's not in all the city of Paris, it's just some streets. But we can see, yes, this kind of image shocking people. They put fires on garbage. They destroyed some bus stop. And the government and some ministers are threatening what can happen tomorrow, because tomorrow is, I said previously, is a really important day. The law will be confirmed or not. So they are wondering what could happen tomorrow, and violence could happen too.
So you're expecting tomorrow is, as you said, the big, big day in all of this where it all comes together. And are you expecting it to go through? Are you expecting it to pass and therefore, unfortunately, expecting much worse scenes than what we're showing people live now?
Well, the thing is, unions, you said, are saying that even if the law is validated tomorrow, the pension law, they won't stop to manifest and to go and to protest. They want to keep going and to say that they don't agree with the law. So I think this violence could, going on and going on. So that they're threatening that.
Marie, is this just about pensions, or are the people angry about other things as well? Are they angry about the general political situation in France, about maybe a more globalist agenda, about other things? What are they angry about other than the pensions?
I completely agree with you. It's globalist protest because of the pensions, yes, but also because the inflation, price are increasing in supermarkets. And actually, I think there is also a problem around the Emmanuel Macron personality and politics. So it's different steps, and they are, well, not all the majority of French people, but these unions and some French people are disagree around all the politics of Emmanuel Macron and his prime minister.
OK. Marie, thank you very, very much. And look, make sure that you stay safe as well, because hopefully we can talk to you again a bit later on. And all the best to you. Take care. Thank you for joining us there. That's Marie Chantrate there, who's political journalist at TF1. Yeah, obviously, we're going to be keeping a very, very close eye on what's been going on in Paris. It does look like it's massively a powder keg situation, doesn't it? Closer to home, though. The junior doctors are still striking. And as far as we know, he's not necessarily closer to home. Their union boss is still on holiday. Even members of his own family now have come out and said they don't agree with the strikes. And what on earth is this guy doing? It's all right for some, though, isn't it? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
OK, welcome back. Now, Labour might have a healthy lead in the polls at the minute, but tensions within the party are rising over Keir Starmer's stance on trans issues. Now, GB News has learned that the LGBT wing of the party is considering withdrawing from Pride marches this year because the party brand has become so toxic amongst our community. Very shortly, I'm just going to play you a little package from our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. But just have a think about this. This is what happens when you desperately try to appease everyone and you end up appeasing absolutely nobody. Keir Starmer sitting on the fence, and this is what happens. Our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, has this exclusive report.
LGBT Labour has long been a visible and notable wing of the Labour Party, with dozens of official patrons in Parliament and a string of campaigning successes under the last Labour government. Yet now GB News understands that LGBT Labour are considering withdrawing from marching across all British LGBT Pride events this year due to safety concerns for their own members. Senior sources within the group have told us that the Labour Party has become viewed with increasing hostility within parts of the LGBT community in recent months. This follows a series of U-turns from the leadership of the party. The hostility has grown to the point that many members now do not feel comfortable marching under the Labour Party banner. Lloyd Russell Moyle, a patron of LGBT Labour, told GB News,
I am proud to have walked and marched with Labour LGBT members at Prides around Britain, and anything that makes that more difficult is something that I will oppose, and so will many of my colleagues. But that is not different from saying that we need a reset to this debate and we need to bring the public on board.
These concerns revolve around recent controversies regarding transgender rights, which LGBT Labour has been campaigning fervently in favour of. Yet Sir Keir Starmer has been seen to flip-flop on these issues, raising concern and hostility from what many would consider to be Labour's most natural allies. Not only have Labour's recent positions put Labour out of joint within the so-called gender-critical movement, but U-turning on many of these positions has made Labour, and particularly Sir Keir Starmer, seem like an untrustworthy ally to many within LGBT Labour. In 2020, the Labour leader said the Gender Recognition Act was, quote, in desperate need of reform to introduce self-declaration for transgender people. And as recently as October, Sir Keir was on record saying,
we will also modernise the Gender Recognition Act.
Yet by late March this year, he has suggested he does not support such a change, and that
if you're going to make reforms, you have to carry the public with you. And I think that's a very important message, and I think that's why it's clear that in Scotland there should be a reset of the situation.
Starmer has also come under criticism for meeting with an anti-LGBT pastor over the Easter weekend.
Steve McCabe is a Labour MP who has called on the party to allow so-called gender-critical groups to attend conference, alongside LGBT groups.
It seems a bit strange if, because there is a disagreement and some, difficulty over the rights of certain individuals and certain groups, that should descend into total factionalism. It seems to me to defeat the purpose of the exercise. So, I guess my view is people should just calm down a bit and see if they can actually reach an accommodation with each other.
One thing's for sure, In trying to please everyone, Sir Keir Starmer is at risk of losing allies across the board. Tom Harwood, GB News.
I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating, isn't it? And this is, I think, a comment, really, and a visible sign for people of when you're trying to appease everyone. Keir Starmer, it's worth noting, he can't tell you what a woman is. So he can't tell you what a woman is. He says 99% of women don't have a penis. That plays out to Rishi Sunak's 100% of women who you don't think have a penis. And that's not enough. Now, of course, the Labour Party is going down in the estimations of the LGBT community. I mean, it is just... I'm sorry, I just think it's absolute madness, this. I mean, the guy can't do right for doing wrong, and it just shows you, doesn't it? And as well, what happened in Scotland, when you think about the idea that Nicola Sturgeon essentially died on the hill of trying to get some kind of gender reform there, there was massive public backlash. There was a very small but very vocal minority of people who were in favour of it, and she ended up, well, getting ousted a little bit because of that. Potentially she quit for some other reasons that I'm sure we're going to rear their head very soon. But Keir Starmer, why on earth now? Why on earth would he decide to want to get involved in all of this stuff? It is just madness. But anyway, GBviews at gbnews.uk. It is the third day of the junior doctors' strike, though, and as far as we know, one of the union leaders is still on holiday. So if you're watching on GB News, Dr Lawrenson is on the left of your screen there. He's currently on annual leave and is therefore not striking alongside his fellow junior doctors, who will end up significantly out of pocket for the strike. So he is on annual leave. That means he's still getting paid. It's worthwhile noting as well that the very posh school that he went to has fees somewhere in the region of around £40,000 a year. It's also worth noting that some members of his own family have said that they're quite shocked at his behaviour and that they don't agree with the strikes. But there you go. Maybe they're on holiday with him. That'll be frosty, won't it? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that he was surprised to hear that Dr Lawrenson was on holiday. But look, with this being one of the biggest strikes in NHS history, you would expect their leader to be on the picket lines, to be front and centre, to be going out and about, doing the media rounds. Because let's be honest with you, it's patients, millions of them, who are really suffering as a result of this. But no, Dr Rob Lawrenson, co-chair of the BMA Junior Doctors Committee, is away. But I wanted to know where he is. Has anyone seen this guy? There haven't been any leaked pictures of him anywhere. Maybe he's... I don't know, visiting the Great Pyramids of Giza in Cairo? Could he possibly be sunning himself on a Caribbean beach, maybe, with a little pina colada, maybe? I don't know. What do you reckon about all of that? That does look lovely, to be fair. Disneyland is a very popular holiday destination around this time of year. Is he there meeting Mickey Mouse? The Colosseum? Great laugh. Great day out at the Colosseum. And after all, he does seem to be up for a gladiatorial fight, even if he doesn't want to stand shoulder to shoulder with colleagues. And then there's always Down Under, Ayers Rock. This is a huge draw, a big draw for those who want to get away from it all. And he might be getting a decent deal on it as well this time of year. Who knows? But there we go. Meanwhile, Dr Lawrenson has come into criticism, like I've said, from his own family. His dad, Ian, said to The Sun, "We have a conflict of interest because we're taxpayers, customers of the NHS, and he's on the other side, wanting more money. It was a bit of a surprise to us when he stood for election. This is to be the BMA's Junior Doctors Ambassador or whatever he's called. He's not been known as some sort of militant anarchist and, get this, a red in the bed." I mean, it's brilliant, isn't it? It is absolutely fascinating, this stuff. And Robert Lawrenson's uncle, who is also called Robert, which saved us having to type something else out, weighed in as well. He said in the Daily Mail, they're going on a 4-day strike. What's that about? I've got a hernia that's not being treated. I would like a 35% increase on my pension. If they want 35%, I want 35%. I mean, it is absolutely magnificent, this, isn't it? Even his own family there. But his family not saying what the vast majority of people are thinking? I want to know, have you seen Dr Robert Lawrenson anywhere? You can email us, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Have you spotted him out on your holidays? Is he sunning it up in Mallorca? There are rumblings that he's been at a wedding somewhere in the UK. But, I mean, how long's this wedding been going on for? Because he's been gone days now, hasn't he? These strikes have been going on for a little while. So, there you go. I want to know what you think about all of that. But, look, I'm going to delve into the inbox to round off the hour because lots of you have been getting in touch about some of our top stories today. And the big one, and we're going to talk about this again at the top of the next hour, which is about... Initially, it sounds very alarming, this, which is about a sharp rise in the case of diphtheria, which have been linked to the Channel migrant crossings. 97% of the cases were from young Afghan, well, boys under 18, young men, however you want to phrase it. And Kimberly says, look, one day we learned that there have been terrorists who've been allowed into the country, and now we hear that there's diphtheria. Regardless of many of us are vaccinated against it, many will be concerned that these issues need to come to a stop. And that is Kimberly's view there. GBviews at It is worthwhile noting again that the vast majority of the British public are indeed vaccinated against diphtheria, but I think it's reasonable that people are concerned about it. So I'll give you some more info on that. We've got Meghan Markle's non-attendance at the coronation and the latest from Joe Biden's visit to Ireland as well. And do we need to do something to encourage people, and I hold my hands up to this, to lose weight? Because the cases of diabetes, I know not every single case of diabetes is down to personal weight, but diabetes is now hit over 5 million, and that is putting a burden on the NHS. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's just gone 4 o'clock. Busy hour coming your way. When's it not? Concerns after a sharp rise in the number of diphtheria cases that have been linked to young Afghans coming across the channel. Are you concerned? Should you be? I'll be giving you some information on all of that. Joe Biden's in Ireland. Yes, that's right. It's been all right for the guy, but there has been quite a notable gaffe, and we will play that for you very, very shortly. It's always good for a laugh, isn't it? There we are. And yes, now, this is a very, very serious story. Are we sitting on a diabetes time bomb? I know that not all types of diabetes are down to people who are overweight, etc., but quite a few of them are, and I'm asking whether or not people should do more to look after their own personal health and take the edge off the NHS. We'll be talking to an expert on all of that. And finally, Coronation chicken, Meghan Markle saying that she is not going to be coming to the coronation. Has she actually made the right call, though? Do you think that instead of her running scared, maybe she's actually decided to do everyone a favour? We went out and about earlier and spoke to one woman about this.
I think,
She didn't want to go. So I was like, if you think she's just going to cause issues, maybe it's best just not to go.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that was a man, but there you go. Would have been nice to have been told, wouldn't it? Anyway, Patrick Christys here on GB News. I'll see you in a sec. There we go. gbviews at gbnews.uk is indeed that email address. Get in touch on anything that you've just heard there. Are you worried about the rise in diphtheria cases? And also, of course, as well, Meghan Markle and loads more coming your way. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Right now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. At just after 4 o'clock, this is your latest news. And the US President Joe Biden has been meeting with Ireland's Taoiseach Leo Varadkar in Dublin all afternoon. Mr Varadkar telling the President it was wonderful to have him back in Ireland. The leaders also praised each other's leadership in relation to the war in Ukraine. Earlier, the American president visited the President, Michael D. Higgins, at his official residence, an armed guard on standby around the building in Phoenix Park to welcome the American leader. The two leaders taking part in a tree planting ceremony and also ringing the ceremonial peace bell. So President Biden is due to address the Irish Parliament later on the second day of his 3-day visit to the Republic of Ireland. Signing in earlier to the visitors' book, Joe Biden said he didn't feel like going home.
An honour to return, and I talk about returning again to the home of my ancestors, to celebrate the things that bind Ireland and the United States and recommit ourselves to peace, equity, and I think the most Irish of words used in my family was dignity. And dignity. So, anyway, thank you all very much. And I'm not going home. I'm staying here. And this is an incredible place.
The Chancellor says the outlook for the UK economy is brighter than expected, despite new figures showing there was no growth in the month of February. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows a 0.4% decrease in gross domestic product from January. The services sector fell, with the ONS blaming strike action by teachers and civil servants. A fall in gas and electricity usage also went down due to the milder weather. But the figures do show GDP grew 0.1% in the 3 months up to February, with Jeremy Hunt saying the UK is now officially set to avoid recession. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says, though, the government failed to help people.
Well, the economy figures that came out today are very devastating. It shows that productivity and the growth in the economy has been completely flatlined, and we've seen that from the IMF that have said that they don't believe that's going to get any better this year. So that is having an impact on people. Energy bills are going up, their mortgages and rents are going up, their food prices are going up, and the government have failed to help families, which has a knock-on effect on the economy and growth, because if people haven't got money to spend, then that will affect, growth in this country.
8 serving and former Metropolitan Police officers have been found guilty of gross misconduct over discriminatory and offensive messages they sent on WhatsApp. The officers, 7 men and 1 woman, were found to have sent sexist, racist, homophobic and disablest comments in a group chat, including talking about Katie Price's son Harvey's disability and weight. During the 5th day of the hearing, the legal chair described the breach of standards as so serious it justified dismissal. Our reporter Paul Hawkins has the latest.
All 7 men and 1 woman found guilty of sending those messages, found guilty of gross misconduct. We're waiting to hear whether they are to be dismissed by the Metropolitan Police, who of course are going through this huge process of reassessing officers for conduct, not just about their criminality but also about their wrongdoing, all part of this process to try and re-establish Londoners' confidence and trust in the Metropolitan Police.
Let's bring you up to date now with events surrounding Donald Trump in the United States, who's currently facing questioning in a deposition in New York in a £200 million civil fraud lawsuit. The former president is accused of being part of a decade-long scheme to manipulate property values and therefore his net worth and obtain loans and tax benefits. Posting on social media, Donald Trump said he would use the case to show what a great, profitable and valuable company he'd built. It comes ahead of the trial, which is scheduled to begin in October. To France now, where demonstrations have continued on the 12th day of nationwide strikes. Hundreds of railway workers gathered at Paris's Gare de Lyon station to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to increase the pension age by just 2 years to 64. Opinion polls showing a wide majority of voters still oppose those reforms. Tomorrow, the Constitutional Council will decide whether or not the law can be applied in France. And lastly, the Royal Mint is set to release a new range of commemorative coins featuring a crowned portrait of His Majesty the King for the very first time. The collection depicting King Charles III wearing the Tudor crown, which he personally chose for the portrait. A 50p and a £5 coin will be released later this month, ahead of his coronation. That's coming up, of course, on May the 6th. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, welcome back, everybody. What you are witnessing right now is an increasingly tense situation in Paris, and we're going to be bringing you the latest on this. There are more protests taking place, initially over the rise of the pension age from 62 to 64, but also, it must be said now, a whole heap of other reasons. Just general disdain for Emmanuel Macron and some of his policies, but also on top of that as well, a perceived globalist agenda. People maybe want a little bit more France first, as it were. And we were watching earlier on, weren't we, with smoke grenades were going off. It does look like things are a bit more orderly now. Always the potential for violence, though. The French riot police there, in their numbers, are just guiding people through the streets of Paris. And we were seeing a variety of different flags as well. And projectiles were previously being thrown at French police, but that appears to have calmed down somewhat now. We'll dip in and out of that as indeed we get it. Now, in other news, Joe Biden will address both the houses of the Irish Parliament later this hour. And we will bring that to you live on GB News, you lucky people. He has had a busy day so far, though. He's been meeting the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar for bilateral talks. And before that, he met the Irish President, Michael D. Higgins. Well, look, I wanted to bring our very own Arlene Foster in now, former First Minister of Northern Ireland. Arlene, look, absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you very much. And hopefully we might be able to see your reaction as well after Joe Biden eventually shuffles up to the podium and gives us some of his sage wisdom. But do you regret saying that you think he hates the UK?
No, I don't regret that. I think he has a disdain from the UK, and he had very carefully scripted words when he was in Belfast, which I think was very much appreciated by all of those present. Mention of the Ulster Scots community, who, of course, helped to build modern America. But once he's off script, Patrick, I think he reverts to type, and he was talking about his cousin, Rob Kearney, who, of course, plays for the Ireland rugby team. And he said he beat up the Black and Tans instead of saying he beat the All Blacks. Now, why would somebody be thinking about the Black and Tans? Just for our listeners and viewers, the Black and Tans are a recruited force that was brought in at the time of the War of Independence in Ireland. And they were hated by Irish Republicans. They came mostly from Great Britain. They were soldiers, many of them, who had served in World War I. And even to this day, Irish Republicans have songs about the Black and Tans. So why would a president be thinking about the Black and Tans when he's actually should be thinking about the All Blacks? I mean, I think it goes to his mindset in relation to what happens in Ireland.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Do you think, Arlene, that there might be a case to suggest that the people of the Republic of Ireland are actually being shamelessly used by President Joe Biden here, who I am not convinced is absolutely as clued up as he might like to sound like he is on the hotbed of issues and the real proper history of the island of Ireland? Maybe they are just being used as a cheap vote-winning scheme back over in the United States. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, look, I mean, I have no doubt because the president is the president of the United States, and it's always an honour to have someone of that office come to your country. And I think people in Belfast felt that. People in Dublin undoubtedly feel that as well. But what I was trying to point out was that he hasn't been even-handed in relation to Northern Ireland. He was when he came the other day. I acknowledge that. Of course, I acknowledge that in a scripted speech. But I'm just pointing out the fact that he is not always balanced in relation to Northern Ireland. And it's funny, you know, the reaction I have had from unionists here in Northern Ireland has been overwhelmingly positive in relation to what I had to say in relation to Biden. Obviously, I've had some cranks sending me threats and what have you, the usual sort of thing. But I have to say, for unionists in Northern Ireland, they were glad that someone was actually speaking up and saying, here's what this man has said in the past about Protestants, about unionists who live in Northern Ireland. Thankfully, somebody has acknowledged that. And that's all I was doing, acknowledging that there were issues that he had raised in the past that weren't exactly diplomatic. I acknowledge he was diplomatic in Belfast on Tuesday or Wednesday when he came, but that was because he gave a scripted speech.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think anyone will be able to see that, Arlene. And I just want to, if you don't mind, just me ask you a bit about how personal this is for you, because we all know, sadly, obviously, what happened to your father. And is it a little bit offensive or risky, do you think, for Joe Biden to be so casual with the way that he appears to be? I just wonder whether or not he's actually doing more to whip up tensions than he realises.
Well, I don't think he's whipping up tension. I think the office of the President of the United States is a very powerful one. And in the past, the office of the President of the United States has been helpful in relation to Northern Ireland. Dare I say, Bill Clinton attempted to be even-handed at the time of the Belfast Agreement. He's coming here next week again with his wife Hillary Clinton, and it will be acknowledged that he has tried at least to be even-handed. But the point I was making is that Joe Biden's record has not been even-handed, and I think that has to be acknowledged. And I think just to push it all away and say that's a nonsense is not actually recognising some of the things that he has said in the past, which have been very offensive, frankly, to those of us from a British tradition living here in Northern Ireland.
Could I just get you to elaborate a little bit on that then, Arlene? I know you and I are surrounded by the news on a daily basis, so what you said there might seem obvious to us, but perhaps there are people watching now who won't necessarily be able to recall off the top of their head some of the things that you yourself find so offensive from Joe Biden. So could you give some examples?
Well, OK. Yeah, I will give some examples. So back in 1985, when we had a special relationship between President Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, he opposed attempts to make extradition easier, in other words, to bring IRA suspects from America back to Northern Ireland to face trial. He opposed that in the Senate when he was a senator. He has made comments that if you wear orange, you're not welcome. That was when he was vice president. He made those comments, and of course, those of us from an orange tradition here in Northern Ireland find that offensive. He is very proud of the fact that his mother refused to sleep in a bed that Her late Majesty the Queen slept in. He thinks that is something to be very proud of as well. And he continuously makes comments when he goes on foreign visits about Irish matters. So, for example, when he was in the West Bank recently, he made comments about the fact that because he was Irish American, he could understand how the Palestinians felt because he was from a Catholic background in Ireland, implying, of course, that the UK was similar to Israel in connection with Palestine. So he makes all of these comments, and that was just what I was reflecting on. And then, of course, he's made the comments about the black and tan since he's arrived here on the island of Ireland, and he made those just last night.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Arlene, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure. Arlene Foster there, who is the former First Minister of Northern Ireland and a GB News presenter as well. Now, Joe Biden produced one of his trademark gaffes. Arlene was referring to it, and very luckily we do actually have a clip of it for you. He was talking about the Irish rugby union team's famous win a few years ago over New Zealand, who are known, as we all know, as the All Blacks. However, he managed to call them the Black and Tans, which was the nickname of the British soldiers who fought Irish rebels just over 100 years ago. Play the clip.
See this tie I have with a shamrock on it? This was given to me by one of these guys. Right here was a hell of a rugby player, and they beat the hell out of the Black and Tans. Oh, God. It was
It's a hard watch, isn't it? It's a hard watch, but says a lot what he does. Moving on. Tory peer Baroness Warsi has recently criticised Home Secretary Suella Braverman for racist rhetoric on grooming gangs that might spark a violent backlash against British agents. So we know this story, we were covering it a lot of the time. Suella Braverman came out and highlighted the issue with British Pakistani grooming gangs in this country, and for some reason that was deeply controversial. But what about Baroness Warsi now, who's come out and said that she thinks that Suella Braverman's a racist, essentially? What about her own associations? And it can now be revealed right here on this show that the Baroness is due to speak at an event next month alongside a UN official who has been accused of, quote, outrageous anti-Semitism by US officials. GB News investigative reporter Charlie Peters has the story for us. Charlie, what's going on?
We took a look at the Baroness's calendar. On May the 17th, she is speaking at an event hosted by a rights group called the Balfour Project, and Baroness Warsi is going to be leading an opening address at this discussion on the Palestinian territories, Israel, where the keynote speaker will be the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese. In December, this UN official came under enormous scrutiny after it was revealed in 2014 she'd written an open letter in a Facebook post in which she described America as being subjugated, I quote, subjugated by the Jewish lobby. Now, when this post was revealed, obviously, many people criticised the UN very strongly, and her, describing it as corrosive anti-Semitism. In February, a slew of US officials came out to lead criticism against her for her comments. The US ambassador to the UNHCR said it was outrageous and corrosive, and the special envoy on anti-Semitism in the US said it was blatant anti-Semitic rhetoric. Now, despite this, and the storm that's kicked up since December, Baroness Warsi appears happy to speak alongside this person at this event and indeed introduce her. And I think this strikes as a particular concern of possible controversy, that in the same week that she is criticising Suella Braverman, in her view, for racist rhetoric that could inspire a violent backlash, we have her also introducing an event where someone is accusing Jews of running American politics, murky, disgusting anti-Semitism.
Well, it seems to be an odd way to go about things if she is going to take the moral high ground about, well, frankly, facts in relation to British Pakistani grooming gangs. And it's important, again, to stress that Suella Braverman, I don't think many people really were trying to suggest that there isn't child sexual exploitation taking place by the white demographic of Great Britain. People were very quick to point out that the vast majority of perpetrators of child sexual abuse are indeed white. Those are also facts. But there are concerns when you look at places like Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, we could go on, where the perpetrators of the grooming gang incident there have been of British Pakistani descent and heritage. And she was pointing that out, and that in itself was deemed to be racist or racially aggravated, essentially reading into what Baroness Warsi was saying there, but she appears to be happy to share a platform with someone who thinks that Jews are in America.
Well, it's unclear at this stage if she's aware of Albanese's comments, although considering how popular they were at the time, it would be very surprising, I think, that her office has missed this controversy. So you'll wait to see. We've contacted the Balfour Project and the office of Baroness Warsi for comment, and they've yet to offer anything at this time.
They haven't offered anything back yet?
Not yet.
OK, well, we will obviously bring them their reply as and when we get it. Look, thank you very much, Charlie. Charlie Peters there, who's GB News Investigates. Just bringing you an update on a story that we've been all over here, which has been the fallout from Suella Braverman's comments about British Pakistani grooming gangs. So there we go. Now, experts say that the UK is facing a diabetes crisis, with more than 5 million people now suffering from the disease. But I want to know what can be done about this. I know there are different types of diabetes. Not all of them, of course, are linked to weight. I want to make that very clear. But in the cases that are, do we need to do a bit more? Either personal responsibility, shed a few pounds, take the burden off the NHS? Should we incentivise people to lose weight? You can't really force people to lose weight, can you? What's going on? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, the UK's economic growth was flat in February, the Office for National Statistics said this morning, but manufacturing output was down 0.2%. Manufacturing is, of course, central to the government's aim of levelling up the Midlands and the north of England. So, did Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's recent budget help or hinder efforts to level up the UK? Our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, has this special report from the West Midlands, Britain's manufacturing heartland.
Builders are busy in Birmingham, the UK's second biggest city. But is the government's flagship levelling up policy, spreading wealth from the southeast to the Midlands and north, now a reality?
This is Victoria Square in central Birmingham, one of several public spaces in the city that's been getting a much-needed facelift. But to what extent does levelling up extend beyond city centres to towns across Britain's regions?
Material prices have increased significantly.
In Walsall, 10 miles from central Birmingham, PP Control and Automation manufactures internal control systems which operate complex machinery. With 230 workers, PP is expanding fast. But CEO Tony Haig says the recent rise in corporation tax and still sky-high energy bills will hurt companies across the Midlands.
I think levelling up is a complete and utter joke and has been a political slogan for some time. I don't see any evidence whatsoever of any genuine activity around levelling up.
In his budget 3 weeks ago, Jeremy Hunt announced low-tax investment zones, including parts of Birmingham. But the leader of the city's Labour-run council says levelling up isn't happening.
The Office of Budget Responsibility are forecasting a downgrading of the UK growth over the coming 12 months as a result of the Conservative budget. So I think it was very, very disappointing. We're also faced with the cost of living crisis right across the city. And again, the OBR are saying that living standards are going to have their hardest hit since the 1950s. So I don't think the budget offered very much.
Birmingham has a Labour council, but the West Midlands as a whole has a Tory mayor. Andy Street says the new investment zones will encourage growth, making levelling up a reality.
We're standing in what you would probably say is Britain's best and biggest, most successful enterprise zone here in the city centre. That has definitely bolstered growth. We've seen behind you HSBC coming in, Goldman Sachs coming in there. They probably wouldn't have done to this location if it hadn't been for that status. So we've learned from that. We've proposed to government those new measures. They've agreed. That will definitely bolster growth.
So what do ordinary Brummies say? Is levelling up just a slogan?
I think it's always going to be London, and always has been, really. I can't really see that happening. I think that's always going to be the case. It's where the money is.
Yeah, it's written, but there are some areas that they are not really working on.
Probably a gimmick, like most things are, so. But that's as much as I know about it.
As the economy struggles to recover and manufacturers fight on, the success or otherwise of levelling up could decide the next general election. Yet even in Birmingham city centre, this flagship policy is, at best, a work in progress. Liam Halligan, GB News, in Birmingham.
Yeah, well, joining us now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Yeah, that guy didn't mince his words, did he?
Even in the city centre of Birmingham, you know, the heart of our second city, levelling up, there's a sort of ambivalence about it. What is it? Oh, I heard of it. It's a bit of a gimmick.
See it, can you?
You can't... And then you go 10 miles down the road to Walsall, one of the Midlands' leading businessmen, Tony Haig, is a very well-known guy, and he says, quote, levelling up is a complete joke. I don't see any sign of it. If I was a sort of young gun around Rishi Sunak at the moment, that report would worry me, because if the likes of Tony Haig and other business leaders in the Midlands don't think levelling up is happening, then they've got a problem come the next general election.
Has Labour actually said anything that makes people think that they would do a better job of levelling up?
Labour have come out yesterday, actually. They came out with their 5-point plan for the high street. We covered it to some degree. They say they want to lower business rates, a sort of tax on business. But Labour seem to be happy to simply comment on the general macroeconomic environment, which, while we've avoided recession, is pretty lacklustre. Just this morning, Patrick, I've got the numbers here. The Office for National Statistics brought out the GDP figures for February, and as Gordon Brown once said, there was 0% growth. I mean, so GDP basically stayed where it was during February. The service sector was down. That was largely because of strikes by teachers and other parts of the public sector. Construction did pretty well, up 2.4%, because there was decent weather in February, and you see their production down 0.2%. That is the part that includes manufacturing. And if manufacturing can't really get going and escape from this sort of sluggish recovery that we're part of and get motoring, then the economy more broadly is going to stay lacklustre.
How much of an impact on growth did the strike action have? Has it had?
I think it's had a major impact on growth. I tell you what else has had an impact on growth. The fact that the NHS waiting list is 7 million strong. Of course, a lot of those will be, unfortunately, older people who aren't of working age, but increasingly there are people of working age who are signed off sick, whether it's sickness related to COVID-19 or other treatments that they didn't have during lockdown because the NHS became overwhelmingly a COVID-only service. I think what's also weighing down growth and business sentiment, Patrick, without which the economy really can't get motoring, is that rising corporation tax. I don't think that's gone down very well. And also another part of Jeremy Hunt's budget a few weeks ago that wasn't really commented on very much, though we did talk about it here, was the fact that from the beginning of April, businesses aren't getting help with their energy bills. And it's manufacturers, it's pubs and hospitality. Their energy bills can be 10, 15, 20, 30% of their entire cost base. And those energy bills are still sky high.
So when you weigh it up in that sense that corporation tax, etc., is going to be crippling people, their energy bills is going to be crippling people, could the government be doing something different, or are their hands tied by virtue of the financial situation we're in right now? Is there another obvious solution staring them in the face?
Well, the government would argue that it will not implement any tax cuts until it feels the public finances are on a much firmer footing, and they'd point to the Liz Truss quasi-quatting mini-budget back in October. Others would say that Liz Truss quasi-quatting mini-budget meltdown happened for other reasons, and if the tax cuts they proposed had been put forward in a more coherent way, perhaps, then it would have been fine. I mean, what I would say, particularly about corporation tax, and I've written about this
a lot in my newspaper columns. I think if you kept corporation tax at 19% or even cut corporation tax, I actually think you'd have got more corporation tax revenue. That is what the historic record shows because of the impact on behaviour. But the likes of the Treasury, the OBR, they don't do what we call dynamic forecasting, looking at how a tax change may change behaviour. They just think the tax generates this much at the moment. Yeah. If we put it up by this amount, then we'll get that amount more. Well, that's not how the world works. Yeah. People change their behaviour when they're faced with different taxation situations.
Absolutely, and thank you very much, as ever, Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. We're going to give you a load of stuff there, actually, all of it utter gold, as always. Right, there's loads more now, between now and 5 p.m. We've got an exclusive report on why Sir Keir Starmer is facing backlash from within his own party. I mean, it is a magnificent story in the sense of just watching a diversity group eat itself alive, but there we go. And there's the story of the company that signed up to a trans influencer and then saw a $6 billion wiped off its value. There we go. I've got loads more. I'm going to be talking about Joe Biden in Ireland. Yes, I'm also going to be talking about Meghan Markle, whether or not she should actually be coming to the Coronation. People are saying that she might have done us all a favour by not coming. We went out and about. I'll play you some Vox Pops, as we call them, from members of the public on all of that. And I will have a little update for you as well on the worrying rise of diphtheria cases linked to people coming over on the channel. And we're going to have a discussion about whether or not more of us should be doing more to look after our own health. Why? Because there is an absolute epidemic of diabetes out there, people. Right now, though, it is Polly Middlehurst with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. US President Joe Biden has met with Ireland's Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, in Dublin today. The two leaders praising each other's efforts in relation to the war in Ukraine. And earlier, President Biden visiting President Michael D. Higgins, taking part in a tree planting ceremony and also ringing the ceremonial peace bell. President Biden is also due to address the Irish Parliament shortly. We'll keep you up to date on that right here on GB News. Now, in other news, 8 serving and former Met police officers have been found guilty of gross misconduct over discriminatory and offensive messages they sent on WhatsApp. The officers, 7 men and 1 woman, were found to have sent sexist, racist, homophobic and disableist comments online. During the 5th day of the hearing, the legal chair described the breach of standards so serious it justified dismissal. And in the United States, Donald Trump is currently facing questioning in a deposition in New York in a £200 million civil fraud suit. The former president is accused of being part of a decade-long scheme to manipulate property values and his net worth to obtain loans and tax benefits. Posting on social media shortly before, Donald Trump said he'd use the case to show what a great, profitable and valuable company he'd built. It comes ahead of the trial, which is scheduled to begin in October. And the British fashion designer Dame Mary Quant, who created the miniskirt in the 60s, has died at the age of 93. Her family saying she passed away peacefully at her home in Surrey this morning. She was influential in the swinging 60s and is credited with making fashion accessible to the masses. She was made a Dame for services to British fashion in 2015 and was named the British Fashion Council's Hall of Fame as well. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Today's market stacking up like this. The pound will buy you $1.2518 and 1.1326 euros. The price of gold stands at £1,628.41 and the FTSE 100 stands at 7,841.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We live in one of the fattest nations in Europe, and a new report proves it's doing serious damage to our health. For the first time, more than 5 million people in the UK have got diabetes. And it's not just putting a strain on our waistbands, it's also having a huge impact on the NHS. Let's take a look at some of the key facts from a new report, shall we, which was published by Diabetes UK. It says more than 5 million people are living with diabetes. Around 90% of those have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. That is caused by a number of factors, including, not exclusively, a person being overweight or inactive. 64% of adults in the UK are overweight or obese, which shows the danger of diabetes becoming an even greater problem. The NHS already spends around £10 billion a year on diabetes, which is 10% of the health service's entire budget. Let's talk now to someone who once campaigned for obese NHS staff to wear badges that said, "I'm fat." It's weight loss expert and the presenter of the TV show Fat Families, and can I just say, absolute TV legend as well. It's Steve Miller. Steve, how are you?
Well, the badge actually said, "Be inspired, I'm fat, but I'm losing weight." I love that badge, and it should be worn right now because we have a problem. And let me tell you this about diabetes. I was talking to medical colleagues this morning. Some of the risks of type 2 diabetes, well, diabetes generally, we have heart attacks, we have kidney failure, we have stroke, we have amputation, and we have blindness. These are serious consequences. But we've got a real problem in this country, and I'll tell you why. On the one hand, what we're saying to people is you really need to take care of yourself and not be fat because of the risk of type 2 diabetes. But on the other hand, of course, we've got all the wokeness and the political correctness that sort of evangelizes, love your curves, love your way you are. You know, if you're really bulging, that's okay. And these plus size campaigners, well, they're like diabetes divas, aren't they? So what we've got is a society on the one hand saying, yes, look after your health, this is serious. And then the other hand, oh, no, no, no. If you're happy and you're fat, clap your hands.
Yeah, indeed. And it has almost become a bit of a fashion trend to be clinically morbidly obese. You see some posters, don't you? And it was funny because you weren't allowed at one point to put posters up which basically showed fat people and saying you need to lose weight, join a gym, but you could put people up who looked like bloated whales who died and been left out on the beach to rot in the sun for a month. That's OK. You can make money out of that, but no, you can't actually actively tell people to lose weight. But, Steve, you've got a bit of a tactic for people who might be keen to lose weight, who do find it a struggle, and I believe it involves what you should wear whilst you eat cake. Is that right?
Well, I mean, there's lots of things you can do when you're eating cake, right? And you can actually, well, listen, what I do, so I know what you're getting at, because what you're saying is, I say to people, eat cake naked, looking in a mirror. That'll create a great aversion to being fat. We have seriously got a problem, Patrick, because this is costing billions, and also the impact on people's health, it's getting worse. But of course, we live in this culture, don't we, where, you know, there's no doubt people will be saying today, oh, he's fat shaming. No, I'm not, I'm life saving. And those people that are these plus size activists, campaigners, are putting out a poisonous message, and they are literally, their message, in my opinion, is potentially putting people on death row, and it's got to stop. We've got to ban it. We've got to make slim much more acceptable rather than fat being acceptable, and we've got to celebrate being slim, not fat, much more than we do as a society. People have got to make they've got to make the simplest changes, living 80% eating well, 20% a bit of what you fancy, and do you know what? Feed your mind more than that.
Yeah, and absolutely. And look, again, Steve's made this clear earlier. I've made it clear throughout the course of this show. There are different types of diabetes, and not all of them, even type 2 diabetes, by the way, is always down to obesity. There's a variety of other factors. It is a well-known fact, though, that unfortunately, sometimes a byproduct of obesity and an unhealthy lifestyle can lead to diabetes. Diabetes cases are rising, surging over 5 million people now. A massive impact on the NHS. 10% of the NHS is on your budget.
Listen, let's stop wrapping it up. If you're fat, start to lose weight, because if you're fat, you're probably going to have type 2 diabetes. That's the kind of message that we need to be putting out there, rather than being, you know, treading on eggshells, worried about people's feelings. I'm worried about 5 million people. And do you know what's happened as well? The figures out today, they actually show an increase in the under 40s. with diabetes issues. That is because we're normalising being rotund. We're loving obesity in this country, celebrating it. As I've always said, we've gone from the catwalk to the fat walk.
Yeah, and also, as well, Steve, fat kids. Fat kids. It's child abuse, isn't it?
Well, listen, when people have children, the health of the children is their responsibility. It is not the taxpayer's responsibility. And when I see fat kids in a fast food restaurant with usually fat parents shoveling in the chips and the burgers and so forth, in my opinion, that is abuse. We always used to look out, didn't we, for underfed kids. We need to now look out for the overfed kids, which is absolutely child cruelty.
Steve, look, thank you very, very much, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Keep up the good work. Steve Miller there, who is a TV weight loss guru and expert and the presenter of the show Fat Families. Right, what do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Doesn't hold back, does he? And I think rightly so. Let's get the latest ahead of the coronation now, and in particular, Meghan Markle's decision not to attend. After so much speculation, it was finally confirmed yesterday that while Prince Harry will be there, his wife will not be at the ceremony, which clashes with their son Archie's 4th birthday. Harry has not been seen with the royal family since his bombshell memoir Spare was published. To discuss this now, I'm initially joined by royal commentator Judita da Silva. Judita, thank you very much. Is this a relief, do you think, for the King that Meghan Markle will not be attending?
I think secretly it will be, because it's pretty much a win-win for everyone all around when you look at it from a kind of meta perspective. Because for Harry and Meghan, they get to save face by saying that rather than if Harry had left Meghan behind, they would say that he's kind of taking one side over the other. But having the soft landing cushion of saying it's Archie's birthday, which it legitimately is, it gives to a get-out clause that's viable, credible, and also understandable. And also from the perspective that she has come out publicly and said that she struggled with very severe mental health ramifications for being next to this family that caused her so much grief. And so staying away from it is basically moving in the avenue of preserving her mental health. That's the win for them from the optics. For the royal family and the firm, they know that they want this to be focused on King Charles. And having the circus with Harry and Meghan kept broken up in half, and therefore you have half the drama, it gives them more of a chance of keeping it focused on King Charles. We know that whatever happens, Harry will pull focus, but he will pull left without Meghan by his side.
Could I just point out as well, though, that the King walked Meghan down the aisle in the absence of her father, and it must be said as well, Meghan Markle's family, and as far as I could tell, real friends, were not really in strong attendance at her own wedding. And read into that what people will, but she now won't be there to make it for his coronation. Does that not indicate that maybe she's a bit self-obsessed?
I personally wouldn't go that far, because I think she's in a position of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But let's be clinical about it. If I worked on Meghan's PR team, I would tell her going is pointless. It's basically an exercise in futility, because there is no way this close to the wave of the Oprah interview, the documentary, the release of the book, you can swing British favour. Too many people are against you and publicly against you, and that will become the narrative of the coronation, and you will be blamed for that. You need to have a kind of resting period. And also by Harry going on his own, he's done it before with the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, where he's been to an event around his family without Meghan, and done it without any drama, and returned home. You give the perception of a potential rapprochement between the prodigal son and his estranged family, and you're staying away from that. So the optics work from you from a PR point of view. So if she does come, she will be condemned. If she doesn't come, she'll be condemned. So you're looking for an avenue where there's most benefits and least negativity, and I think they've chosen the right one.
Look, Judita, thank you very, very much. Absolute pleasure to talk to you, I must say. Judita Silva there, who is a royal commentator. And, yes, well, I wanted to know what members of the public thought, what ordinary people thought. We are, of course, the People's Channel here at GB News. And so what we did was we decided to find out what the great British public actually thought of Meghan's decision not to go to the coronation.
I think it's okay, it's fine, it's her own decision, that's fine.
It'd be nice if she could be there to be with the family, but yeah, probably just to stop any kind of conflict, she's probably making the best choice.
I think she should come and bring the children. It's a family occasion, she is part of the family, and it will be lovely to see her there.
I think you shouldn't want to go, sort of thing. Like, if you think she's just going to cause issues, maybe it's best just not to go.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised she's not coming, but it's probably for the best if she doesn't come. I think there's a lot of trouble being sort of created and thrown up, and I think if there's, you know, quite a significant family event like the coronation, it's probably quite wise that she stay away, really.
Right, there we go. Joining me now is royal superfan. It's Anita Atkinson. Anita, wow. Fantastic. OK, look, Anita, do you think that Meghan Markle has made the right decision not to come?
I don't care one way or the other, really. I'm not really interested in Meghan. So.
OK, fair enough. Well, it's great to have you on the show, Anita. So are you looking forward to the coronation?
Looking forward to it, man. I'm really excited. I cannot wait. Can't wait.
Good stuff. Tell us a bit about the memorabilia that you've got there. It looks pretty impressive. You have got rooms full of this stuff, haven't you?
Well, I've got my own museum, yeah. But it's this stuff behind us is mostly, well, it's mostly from the coronation because I'm in my element. I've been out today buying all the coronation stuff from all the different shops. I'm over the moon. But this memorabilia behind actually goes back to 1948. With the birth of Charles.
Oh, that's really fascinating, actually. OK, so what prompted you to get so into all the royal memorabilia?
Well, I'm presuming that it was my mother because she had a china cabinet when I was a little girl with royal memorabilia in it from the 1935 Silver Jubilee, the 1937 coronation, one that wasn't, one that was. And she just used to tell us stories about kings and queens. And I think I don't actually have a memory of not wanting to know about the monarchy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've just been told in my ear that you are already making your preparations for the coronation. Is that right?
I am. I've got my backpack on the floor down here. It's absolutely stuffed. I've got a Union Jack tent in there. I've got a wearable sleeping bag. I've even got a coronation puzzle book for when I'm sitting there, you know, hour after hour, waiting, which I'm going to be.
So, hang on a minute. How far in advance are you going to go and start camping out?
I'm going to London the Saturday morning before, and I'm just going to go around casing the joint, looking to see where the best place to stand is. And I'm the dummy, I'm going, and everyone else is following us later in the week.
But this is good though, isn't it? Because then you'll get the best spot. Now, Anita, would you mind, bearing in mind that you are going to be there, you are going to be camping out, and you are an absolute royal superfan. I think it's hard to believe that anyone cares more about the royal family than you do, by the looks of things, actually, Anita. Could we catch up with you when you're out there camping and things? Do you think it would be all right if we checked in with you every now and again, keep getting you on the show? I imagine we'll pay you.
Yeah, well, that would break the boredom, wouldn't it, really? I wouldn't have to do so many coronation puzzles. So, yeah, come on down the mall.
Good stuff. There we go. Well, we'll be keeping a close eye on you, Anita. And thank you very, very much. This is great stuff. Lovely stuff. Anita Atkinson, everybody, a royal super fan. Wow. Anyway, right, OK. So, there we go. What do you make of all of that? Can I just say I love Anita. I think I wish I was as passionate about something as she is about the royals. Moving on. Sir Keir Starmer is facing a backlash from within his own party. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing with the audience very much at the heart of it. like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, Labour might be doing all right in the polls, but tensions within the party are rising over Keir Starmer's stance on trans issues. Now, GB News has learned that the LGBT wing of the party is considering withdrawing from Pride marches this year because the party brand has become, get this, so toxic amongst that community. Joining me now to speak about the fallout from LGBT Labour is comedian and podcast host is James Barr, whose show, Straight Jokes, is touring in the UK this month. Great to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Maybe this might seem a bit strange to people, given that Keir Starmer has been quite vocal initially about not really being able to define a woman, and the Labour Party in general, I think, being arguably more pro-LGBT issues than maybe the Tories or a couple of other parties. Why is this all happening? What's going on?
Well, you're popping my GB News cherry today, darling, so thank you very much on that, and for mentioning my tour. I hope you'll be buying yourself a ticket at jamesbarcomedy.com.
This is fantastic. Yeah, I will do. Why not? Absolutely. I suppose I can't pop your cherry twice, so there you go. Right, what's going on? Why are people so annoyed about all of this?
Listen, I ultimately think that networks like yours are making people annoyed about this. I think that Keir has made a few boobs and done the odd thing that maybe hasn't impressed the LGBTQ plus community. But if we're going to talk about who is really destroying the rights of LGBTQ plus people, it's not the Labour Party. It's the party that have been in power for the last 13 years and created an absolute bin fire for everyone.
So how then? So the concern is that Keir Starmer has, I believe now, offended some elements of the trans community by initially appearing to support things like Gender Reform Act, etc., and reforms to that, and then rowing back on it after seeing the backlash that it got in Scotland. Just on that, before we go on to what you think the bin fire is with the Tory government at the moment, why has that annoyed people?
I mean, it's not a great look to say you're going to do something and then not do it. Just look at the Tory party saying they're going to ban conversion therapy and then taking 4 years to come through with a flimsy ban on conversion therapy that still hasn't actually been acted upon yet. They're the party that are making huge mistakes for the LGBTQ plus community, not necessarily Labour. Also, Labour aren't in power yet. So if we're going to hold them to account for anything, it's going to be when they're in power.
Yeah, I just want to make it very clear. It's not me saying that the Labour Party have done all of this. It's Labour Party members themselves and representatives of the trans community who are coming out and saying that they are concerned.
I think that most Labour Party members feel safe going to a Pride. I think everybody should feel safe at a Pride. They may not feel happy to necessarily march behind the LGBT Labour banner right now because of certain things that Keir's done, like hanging out with that guy who was working with a homophobic church. But ultimately, everyone should feel safe at Pride, and they will. And I think we're quite intelligent, and we're intelligent enough to know that people marching with LGBT Labour don't necessarily all have the same views. Like, we all have different views.
You'd hope so, yeah. Absolutely. No, right, we've got just around 30 seconds. Just plug your tour. Go.
Thanks, babes. Well, my tour is all about how comedians like Dave Chappelle and they basically use gay jokes all the time in their comedy. And so I'm doing a load of straight jokes, and I can't wait to see you there.
All right, good stuff. OK, look, James, thank you very much. That is comedian James Barr, who shows straight jokes, the clue's in the name, is touring in the UK this month, so make sure you get yourself a ticket if that sounds like your thing. Right, now, after his flying visit to Northern Ireland, Joe Biden is making the most of the rest of his trip. He is about to speak to both houses of the Irish Parliament. We're going to go to that shortly, I believe. He is about an hour and a bit late. And there's a huge rise in the case of the fatal disease that has been put down to migrants crossing the channel in small boats, diphtheria. I'll have some more info on that. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade, Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good evening, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. I'm with you for the next hour, so let's make the most of it, shall we? We've got loads coming your way because, yes, that's right, there are concerns about a sharp rise in the amounts of a deadly disease, diphtheria, which is coming across the channel, apparently, with people from Afghanistan in small boats. Is it anything to worry about or not? I'll be talking to you about all of that, and this is going to be a big one for us as well, because Joe Biden is, as we understand it, making his way over to speak to the Irish Parliament as we speak. We'll bring that to you live. He has made a gaffe already on this tour. Will there be any more? We'll be keeping our eye on all of that. In other news, a diabetes time bomb. More than 5 million people in this country at the moment have diabetes, and it is putting a massive burden on the NHS. But what can we do about it? I know it's not all linked to weight, but some of it is. And hey, maybe people like me should lose a bit of weight. Help the NHS, why not? And Coronation chicken. Has Meghan Markle chickened out or not from the coronation? Some people think she's done us all a favour by not attending, and actually, it's the best thing for the big day. But we did go out and about and speak to one, I'm reliably assured this time, woman about this issue.
As if she could be there to be with the family, but yeah, probably just to stop any kind of conflict. She's probably making the best choice.
Well, there we go. What do you think? Lock yourselves in, people. It's going to be a big hour with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Yep, that email address, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Are you worried about the rise in diphtheria that appears to be being brought to this country by people coming across the channel? Do you think it's anything to worry about or not? And yes, Meghan Markle at the coronation and Joe Biden as well. Do you think he's dining out a little bit too much on his Irish heritage? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Well, very good evening to you, and thank you, Patrick. Well, we can tell you that the US President Joe Biden is now on his way to Leinster House, to the Irish Parliament, after meeting with Ireland's Taoiseach Leo Varadkar in Dublin. If you're watching on television, you can see that the two leaders met one another, praising each other's efforts in relation to the war in Ukraine. And earlier, President Biden visited President Michael D. Higgins, taking part in a tree-planting ceremony and also ringing the ceremonial peace bell. President Biden is running behind schedule, we understand, about an hour behind schedule, but he will be due to address the Irish Parliament shortly. Leo Varadkar said that President Biden is committed to the relationship between the UK and the United States.
Should never underestimate the strength of the UK-American relationship and the British-American relationship, and I know that President Biden and his administration are committed to that special relationship, but he is somebody who identifies as Irish-American, who is proudly Irish and takes an interest in Irish affairs.
Now, the Chancellor says the outlook for the UK economy is brighter than expected, despite new figures showing there was no growth in the month of February. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows a 0.4% decrease in gross domestic product from January. The services sector fell, with the ONS blaming strike action by teachers and civil servants. A fall in gas and electricity usage due to milder weather was also responsible. But the figures do show GDP grew 0.1% in the 3 months to February, with Jeremy Hunt saying the UK is set to avoid recession. But the Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, said the government has failed to help people.
Well, the economy figures that came out today are very devastating. It shows that productivity and the growth in the economy has been completely flatlined, and we've seen that from the IMF that have said that they don't believe that's going to get any better this year. So that is having an impact on people. Energy bills are going up, their mortgages and rents are going up, their food prices are going up, and the government have failed to help families, which has a knock-on effect on the economy and growth, because if people haven't got money to spend, then that will affect, growth in this country.
8 serving former Metropolitan Police officers have been found guilty of gross misconduct over discriminatory and offensive messages they sent on WhatsApp. The officers, 7 men and 1 woman, were found to have sent sexist, racist, homophobic and disablist comments in a group chat, including talking about Katie Price's son Harvey's disability and his weight. During the 5th day of the hearing, the legal chair described the breach of standards as so serious it justified dismissal. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, has the latest.
All 7 men and 1 woman found guilty of sending those messages, found guilty of gross misconduct. We're waiting to hear whether they are to be dismissed by the Metropolitan Police, who of course are going through this huge process of reassessing officers for conduct, not just about their criminality but also about their wrongdoing, all part of this process to try and re-establish Londoners' confidence and trust in the Metropolitan Police.
Sussex police say the body of a woman has been found washed up on the beach after a search operation off Brighton Palace Pier last night. Coast Guard helicopters and the RNLI were involved in the rescue effort last night, which was launched yesterday afternoon after reports of a person being swept out to sea. The heavy winds of Storm Noah had made search efforts challenging. Our national reporter Theo Chikomba says police are still trying to identify the body.
Sussex police say an investigation into the circumstances is ongoing and further updates will be provided in due course. So far, there's been no formal identification, but the police say investigations are continuing to establish that.
In the United States, Donald Trump is currently facing questioning in a deposition hearing in New York in a £200 million civil fraud lawsuit. The former president is accused of being part of a decade-long scheme to manipulate property values and his net worth to obtain loans and tax benefits. Posting on social media before he arrived in New York, he said he would use the case to show what a great, profitable and valuable company he'd built. It comes ahead of the trial, which is scheduled to begin in October. And if you've been following Patrick's show today, you'll know demonstrations have continued in France on the 12th day of nationwide strikes there. Hundreds of railway workers gathered at Paris's Gare de Lyon station to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to increase the pension age by 2 years to 64. Opinion polls show a wide majority of voters still oppose the reforms. Tomorrow, the Constitutional Council will decide whether or not the law can be applied in France. That's all from me. That's your latest GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
OK, I've got loads to get through. Let's get cracking. We start with news that small boat crossings have led to a sharp increase in cases of a fatal disease in England. Scientists say the number of people diagnosed with diphtheria went up by more than 500% in 2022. There was an outbreak of diphtheria at the Manston Processing Centre late last year. Now, at the time, the Home Office said that the death of a migrant held there may have been caused by the disease. It's a very worrying headline, certainly. The cases have risen by more than 500%. It is, of course, contagious. It's worth noting that the vast majority of people in this country are vaccinated against it. But I think people are right to be worried. Joining me now is the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. It's Stephen Wolfe. Now, Stephen, this diphtheria story came as a surprise to a lot of people. Not you, I believe. Why not?
No, because on the 27th of August in 2021, an official classification document was sent out from the NHS to all its regional medical directors, their heads and directors of nursing, primary care and public health, and a whole host of senior people in the NHS, informing them and warning them of the dangers of communicable diseases like diphtheria to those who are coming across from Afghanistan in the relocation and assistance programme. And Patrick, let me give you some of the diseases that they mentioned at the time. Diphtheria, hepatitis B, typhoid, malaria, and one that I had to look up called Helminth. So all of these diseases are known to the NHS, they're known to the government, and they're known to be coming across from those who are travelling from Afghanistan, and equally known for those coming across the boats.
Now, again, want to emphasise that we don't want to spark some kind of widespread public health concern here. You don't have to lock yourselves away in your homes. You don't want it to increase things like, racist attacks and all this stuff against people and all of that. But at the same time, it is a concern. We had concerns about potential for terrorists to use the channel as a way to get into Britain. That looks like that's happened. And people, I think, are worried about the idea that some diseases from some other countries might make their way here and catch us by surprise. What should we be doing?
Well, you are quite right. We shouldn't be scaremongering to people about the idea that this is a mass of everybody that's coming across on the boats. The numbers have risen dramatically in terms of percentage terms, but I think we're still looking about 60 cases. But I think the most important thing that we have to look at is the trends. The trends are, if these numbers are rising, it means somewhere along the line, the government is failing in their managed quarantine services process. What they're supposed to be doing, Patrick, is when people come across on the boats, they're supposed to be assessed and medically assessed immediately. They're supposed to be checked to ensure that they don't have communicable diseases. And if they do, they're supposed to be quarantined. It's clear that in Manston case, certainly there was somebody in the managed housing processing place, which is in Manston. But in other cases, we know that they're getting into hotels across the community. So there is a failure somewhere between the linking between testing, the NHS, doctors who are assigned to these asylum applicants, and what's happening in the hotel accommodation.
Yeah, indeed. And again, I want to get some of these stats out there as well, because they're saying that 97% of the patients who have been treated for diphtheria are young Afghan males, they say are under the age of 18, with an unknown vaccination history. Look, is there the potential that unless we get things sorted in the Channel, we are sleepwalking into a disaster here, both in terms of national security and public health?
Well, it's clear that we've seen some really unusual and unfortunate rises in areas such as crime. Through the Albanians, we know that there's massive levels of crime due to that. We've seen that there is the potential for terrorism and those who've claimed asylum here and gone on to do so. Now we have a health issue as well. All this, again, as you've emphasized on your show many, many occasions, it's not about the vast majority of them, it is about the minority, but the minority can cause damage. And all we're asking for those of us who are monitoring the process is the government gets a grip on this. They get the security services and the police to work on crime. They get those involved in health to be able to make sure that this doesn't spread into our communities anymore. That's what we're asking, and that way that the community will feel safe and everybody else will have a knowledge that we have a proper managed immigration and border control system.
Stephen, thank you very much as ever. Stephen Wolf there, who is the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, just talking about that startling rise in the increase in the number of diphtheria cases attributed to individuals from Afghanistan, largely coming across the English Channel. Again, it's important to say, look, most people here will be vaccinated against diphtheria, but still, I think people have a right to be concerned, don't they? Now, though, to Dublin. And Joe Biden will address both houses of the Irish Parliament later this hour, which we will bring live for you on GB News. Biden's had a busy day so far. He's held a meeting with the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, for bilateral talks, as opposed to just the bilatte talks that he held with our Prime Minister here, but there we go. And before that, he'd met the Irish President Michael D. Higgins. And they had a nice little meeting and a walk around, and Michael D. Higgins, his dog, even got involved for a little while until it went a bit feral and they had to lock it away. Let's cross over to Dublin now and speak to GB News' political editor Darren McCaffrey as we await the arrival of Joe Biden to address both houses. Darren, it's been quite the day for old Joe Biden.
Yeah, it has, and he's running quite a bit behind schedule, it should be said. Patrick, about 90 minutes, we reckon, behind schedule. He was due to address both houses of the Irish Parliament, the Oireachtas, at just before 4 o'clock, quarter to 4, and it's what now, well after 5. The Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, has said that's a good sign that Joe Biden seems to be quite enjoying his visit. They have had discussions here in Dublin today, focusing, we're told, on food security, on the rise in threat from China, and also on the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, sorry about this, Darren. I've got to cut across. You go to pictures now, I believe, that we're going to bring people of Joe Biden, who is about to address the houses of the Irish Parliament. There he is. And he's on the third day of his visit to the island of Ireland. Joe Biden has just got out of his motorcade there. He is going to address a joint session of the Irish Parliament, so he will be the first American president to do this since 1995, before the Good Friday Agreement was actually signed. Apparently, anyway, supposedly there was a bit of nervousness in the Biden camp. That is Joe Biden arriving at the camp now, there at the Parliament, I should say. And, yeah, the only person who's not going to be attending the speech, who was invited, as we understand it, was DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. He's the only one out of the 5 leaders of the main Northern Irish parties to decline an invitation to the address. Joe Biden is outside that Parliament building now, and he will be heading up the steps very shortly. I believe we can bring Darren back in, actually. Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much. Sorry to have to interrupt you there, Darren. I always feel very rude doing that, but we are witnessing quite iconic pictures now. Joe Biden, the first American president to address the Irish Parliament in a joint session since 1995. As he stands on the steps there, Darren, a historic day.
Yeah, indeed. As you say, it's only happened 4 times before. The most recent, 1995, Bill Clinton was US president when he came and addressed both houses of the Irish Parliament. The Oireachtas before that was Ronald Reagan in 1980. So it is not something that happens every day, it's fair to say. The Irish Parliament is in a building called Leinster House. The Irish Parliament is made up, like most parliaments across the world, it's bicameral. It's got a directly elected lower chamber, Dáil Éireann, that's got members of Parliament, TDs, and then it's got a Senate which is made up of representatives who were appointed from various parts of the country and from the political parties here in Ireland. Senate building, interestingly, or the room in which it's housed, was actually provided the inspiration for the Oval Office. So if you stand inside it, you can do a tour of it here in Dublin, you can feel almost that you're inside the White House. But yeah, President Biden, I think during the speech, is going to talk about that long-lasting and quite intimate relationship between the United States and Ireland. It clearly is pretty close, not least of all under this president, who is a very Irish-American president. Irish Joe, they call him over here, someone who wears the shamrock, as I say, quite deliberately upon his sleeve. And also, I think he'll talk about the peace process, 25 years on since the Good Friday Agreement. That's the primary reason he's on the island of Ireland. And they may well, too, talk about cooperation in other areas. But be in no doubt, he is going to get a pretty warm welcome from Irish politicians. Every US president tends to get it, but I think there's a special affinity with President Biden, given his ancestral roots to the country. And tomorrow he's going to get a bit more of that when he goes and visits some of those cousins, those very, very distant cousins in the west of Ireland.
Absolutely. Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor there. So Joe Biden has now arrived at the Irish Parliament, and that's ahead of a speech that he's going to be making. We will be bringing that to you live. He's posted a photo op outside, so he's now gone in, so it'll probably be a little while, which leads us on to this, because Joe Biden did produce one of his trademark gaffes last night. He was talking about the Irish rugby union team's famous win a few years ago over New Zealand, who are, of course, the All Blacks. However, he managed to call them the Black and Tans, which was the nickname of British soldiers who fought Irish rebels just over 100 years ago. Let's have a quick reminder of this, shall we?
See this tie I have with a shamrock on it? This was given to me by one of these guys right here. Was a hell of a rugby player, and they beat the hell out of the Black and Tans. Oh, God. It was
Yeah, not great, was it? But that wasn't the first time that Joe Biden has made an embarrassing gaffe. Why don't we look back at some of the other ones? So, here he is in April 2022, where following a speech in North Carolina, he leaves the podium and he shakes the hand of nobody there. He's shaking absolutely nobody's hand as he goes to... Oh, where is he going, Joe? Oh, out that way. OK, there we go. And he also fell up the stairs when attempting to board Air Force One on his way to Atlanta. He tried to recover by giving the salute at the top, but, yeah, not quite. Oh, watch out, Joe. Sorry. Oh, no, gosh. Oh, gosh, someone just help him. Help him up. Help him up. There was concerns about that Air Force One earlier on, by the way, because it was raining the last couple of days, wasn't it? But there we go. At the top, big salute. Nobody noticed. Yes, proud to be an American. Right, OK. And during Biden's presidential campaign in 2020, he was forced to apologise for saying black voters ain't black if they considered voting for Donald Trump. Check this out.
Long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Yeah, OK. When using a teleprompter during a speech at the White House, Biden read a bit more than he was supposed to.
Because of the actions we've taken, things have begun to change. End of quote.
End of quote. Strong emphasis here. Link to break. Oh. Junior doctors are still on strike, but apparently their union leader is on holiday. It's all right for some, though, eh? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel. Break next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back, everybody. It's the 3rd day of the junior doctors' strike, and as far as we know, one of its union leaders is still on holiday. And if you are watching on GB News, Dr. Robert Lawrenson is the one on the left of your screen there. He's currently on annual leave and is therefore not striking alongside his fellow junior doctors, who will end up significantly out of pocket. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that he was surprised to hear that Dr. Lawrenson was on holiday. I am joined now by the former Assistant General Secretary of the RMT Union. It's Steve Headley. Steve, thank you very much. Look, before we get cracking, apologies in advance if I have to cut this short to go to take Joe Biden live. I'm not being rude. That's just something we have to do, I'm afraid. But on this note, how do you feel? How do you feel about the idea that a union leader, in this sense, anyway, the junior doctors union leader, would allow himself to be in a situation where rent-a-gobs like me can criticise him for not being in the country whilst millions of patients potentially suffer?
Well, first of all, he's not a union leader. He's the co-chair of a committee that's negotiating, a co-chair of the Junior Doctors Committee, which means there's another chair. And the reality is that the government have refused to go to ACAS. They've refused to enter negotiations. So if this person's out of the country, it doesn't matter one way or the other, because the government are refusing to go to negotiations. The BMA have said that they'll go to ACAS without any preconditions. The government are refusing to go. And so the fact that the person is on holiday is neither here nor there. It's an attempt to pivot. It's an attempt to actually play the man and not the ball. The real problem is that we've got 9,000 vacancies for junior doctors in the NHS because their wages just haven't kept pace with inflation. Since 2008, they've had about a 25% pay cut in real terms because their wages haven't kept pace with inflation. And that means that 3,000 doctors, over 3,000 doctors, are leaving the NHS every year now because they just can't make ends meet. And we have a situation where 4 in 10 junior doctors have said that they will leave the NHS at the first opportunity. So there's a real crisis here. This is a desperate attempt by the dark forces in Fleet Street.
The thing is, I do take what you mean, but he's walked into this, right? He's absolutely walked into this, and I wonder whether or not people on the picket lines will be a bit concerned, because presumably, if he is on annual leave, then he's getting paid, whereas people who are out on strike are not.
We don't know that. We don't know if he's getting paid or not. And what would usually happen in these situations, if somebody had a family event to attend, then they would donate their money. They would donate whatever money that they got to the strike fund. And it's as simple as that. If leave's booked in advance and the employer refusing to cancel that leave, then what people usually do is donate that money to the strike fund. I mean, this isn't the first time this has happened. This isn't some sort of national leader of the BMA. It's just a junior doctor who's part of the negotiating committee, co-chair of a particular negotiating committee. What we have here is a deliberately created.
Do you question though, Steve, how in touch with the ordinary man and woman on the picket line this guy is, though? You know, an ex-public school boy, that school's costing him tens of thousands of pounds a year. He is, you know, from a multi-million-pound family, etc. You know, do you really think this is the right kind of guy who should be leading a workers' strike? Do you think he can empathise with normal people?
Well, that'll be up to BMA members. They elected him. If they feel that he isn't, then they can get rid of him. It's not for me to say. It's not for you to say. By the way, I'm glad the GBNews are now up for the abolition of private schools. What a step forward! I'm absolutely delighted.
I think you've managed to stretch that one a bit there, Steve, to be fair, but I'll give it to you. But no, I just wonder whether or not this is not necessarily the usual kind of guy that you would see with a prominent role at a union, or is it? I just wondered how that made you feel.
What we have here is a complete diversion, Patrick, which you and your friends in the media are trying to create. What we have is an absolutely genuine case for junior doctors to be paid more money. They need a fast pay rise just to keep them in the NHS. Otherwise, the NHS is going to collapse. 10% people that now leave the junior doctors, over 10%, do so because of burnout. That's because of the massive amount of vacancies, 9,000 vacancies in the NHS, which are there because they can't attract the staff.
There is a slight
problem that has to be addressed.
Yeah, but I think one of the big problems is that we do seem to be losing a lot of people, as you were alluding to go to countries like Australia and Canada, who have the kind of healthcare system that we would essentially, dare I say it, Steve, be blocked from having in this country, potentially by people on the left who don't want to touch and reform the NHS. They want to keep it as a sacred cow, and we can't have a mixed model system, which means that we can pay staff higher wages and also we can deliver better patient care.
But we do have a mixed model system, and that mixed model system and the incompetence of the government, which has spent £2 billion, which would settle this entire junior doctors dispute, even by their own figures, £2 billion, was baffed up the wall on PPE that was no good, that didn't work. So that £2 billion of government incompetence could have settled this whole dispute. Now, the fact of the matter is, we've got the best public service in the world in the NHS, and we have to find ways of funding that. And it's quite simple that we tax the rich more. We make these profiteering oil companies and gas companies pay more money instead of
there is undeniably a rapidly growing case for more windfall taxes, etc. I get that. The problem I would have, Steve, is that we don't, in reality, do we? We do not have the best public service in the world in the NHS. As an idea, it is. As an idea, it is, and it probably once was, but it isn't anymore, is it? We've got 7 million people on the NHS waiting list. We have got staff leaving in their droves. We've got working conditions that are bad for people. So, I mean, how can you say that it is the best?
This is the oldest trick in the book. What you do, if you want to privatise something so your friends in the Tory party, they can make donations to it, what you do is you underfund the system, you make it so bad that people say, well, anything will be better than this, and you open the way to privatisation. They did it with British Rail. Look at the disaster we now have with British Rail. They're doing it with the health service. In fact, you do have a mixed model in the health service now. If you walk into your health service, you may walk through the door of an NHS hospital, but you're likely to get subcontracted for an operation to some private health firm. So that's where all the money's going. All the money's going there. The money's being spent, ridiculous amounts are being spent on agency staff because the NHS aren't paying enough money to recruit ordinary staff. And the whole place is in chaos because of the semi-privatisation and the refusal of subsequent governments to fund the NHS properly.
You don't think rich people should pay for their own healthcare as well as funding the NHS then?
Well, I think that they should pay for their own healthcare like everyone else through their taxes, and they should be taxed more, Patrick.
Right, OK. I'm just keen on this because obviously wealthy people who pay for private healthcare will also still be paying their taxes for the NHS, so they're paying twice, aren't they, really?
Well, I mean, the reality is most of those people are probably claiming money back, like most of the presenters on GB News. I'd imagine they've all got accountants, clever accountants, so they don't pay anywhere near what an average health service worker pays, because they don't have a choice. They get it directed straight by the government.
There's the sound of my non-existent accountant laughing there, Steve, I must say, but there we go.
Okay.
You want to have a look at...
No one in your organisation employs accountants. Is that what you're saying, Patrick?
Well, I don't know, but I don't know, mate, but I certainly don't. And if you saw my
the rest of them, man, and keep you.
If you saw my account, Steve, it looks like a dustbin fire. So there you go. But anyway, Steve, thank you very much. Steve Hadley there, who is the former Assistant General Secretary of the RMT Union. Right, OK. Meanwhile, obviously, Dr Lawrenson has, as I was saying, come into some criticism from his own family because his dad, Ian, told The Sun that there's a conflict of interest there because they're taxpayers, customers of the NHS, and he's on the other side wanting more money. That's his own dad saying that. It was a bit of a surprise to us, he said, when he stood for election. He's not been known as some sort of militant anarchist or a red in the bed. I've got a little quote here from his uncle, yes, who's also handily called Robert, who weighed in. He said to the Daily Mail, they're going on a 4-day strike. What's that about? I've got a hernia that's not being treated. I would like a 35% pay increase on my pension. If they want 35%, I want 35%. So there you go. His own family not too happy. Loads more between now and 6 o'clock, ladies and gents. Meghan won't be coming to the coronation. Has she done the right thing for a change, or is she a coronation chicken? And as the country faces a diabetes crisis, should the state be held responsible if obese people fall ill? I know that there's different types of diabetes and it's not all weight-related, but quite a lot of it is, and it's costing us a lot of money. So what should we do? Do people have more of a responsibility to stay thin? Right now, though, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. President Biden has arrived at the Irish Parliament in Dublin, where he's set to make a historic address. Mr Biden was met by dignitaries, politicians and press as his convoy pulled up to Leinster House, where the Parliament sits. Joe Biden's son, Hunter, and sister, Valerie Biden-Owens, are also in attendance. Earlier, President Biden met with Ireland's Taoiseach, Leah Varadkar, and the two leaders praised each other's efforts in relation to the war in Ukraine. In other news today, 8 serving and former Met officers have been found guilty of gross misconduct over discriminatory and offensive messages they sent on a private WhatsApp group. The police officers, 7 men and 1 woman, were found to have sent sexist, racist and disablest comments online. During the 5th day of the hearing, the legal chair described the breach of standards as so serious it justified dismissal. And in the United States, Donald Trump is currently facing questioning in a deposition hearing in New York. In a £200 million civil fraud lawsuit, the former president is accused of being part of a decade-long scheme to manipulate property values and his net worth to obtain loans and tax benefits. But posting on social media beforehand, Donald Trump said he would use the case to show what a great, profitable and valuable company he'd built. It comes ahead of the trial, scheduled to start in October. And the sad news today that British fashion icon and designer Dame Mary Quant, who created the miniskirt in the 60s, has died at the age of 93. Her family say she passed away peacefully at her home in Surrey this morning. She was influential in the swinging 60s and is credited with making fashion accessible to the masses. She was made a dame for services to British fashion in 2015 and was named in the British Fashion Council's Hall of Fame. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
On the markets, the pound will buy you $1.2529 today and 1.1335 euros. The price of gold is 1,628.09 pence. The FTSE is there at 7,843.38.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, over to the latest now, ahead of the coronation, and in particular, Meghan Markle's decision not to attend. After so much speculation, it was finally confirmed yesterday that while Prince Harry will be there, his wife will not be at the ceremony, which clashes with their son Archie's 4th birthday. Now, Harry has not been seen with the royal family since his bombshell memoir Spare was published, and Meghan is now swerving the event. Someone who's got an opinion on Meghan deciding not to attend the coronation is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, the rumours are that she doesn't want to attend because she didn't want to be booed. Is she a coronation chicken?
I very strongly feel that all of this has been very carefully planned for a long time. The Sussexes have given the royal family very little notice, only 3 weeks, as we know. So far as Meghan's concerned, I don't think that she wanted to attend because very clearly the gulf between the Sussexes and the royal family is enormous, and we know there's a deep rift. It's King Charles's day. It's, of course, literally the crowning moment of his life. And so far as she is concerned, I think she would have felt awkward. I think she would have been concerned. I don't hope that we're not into the level of booing people in the streets or whatever, but there might have been some public feeling, who knows? The point, however, is that what's been shown in opinion polls, and not only in Britain but in America, is that the Sussexes have lost a huge amount of popularity. I mean, the swing was absolutely vast, as recorded in Newsweek. So what she's doing, she has her excuse. It's Archie's birthday. She has said, and if you believe this, it's up to you, the only title I really care about is the title Mom. Yeah. Well, she's a good mother.
But you know, King Charles was there for her when conspicuously her own father wasn't there. There wasn't the wedding. There wasn't exactly a huge queue of good, old, long-standing friends. In fact, I'm not really sure there were any, were there, which people can read into that what they make of it. There weren't a wider network of relatives. In fact, I'm pretty sure one of the only people that she hadn't essentially paid to be there, in the likes of George Clooney, etc., was actually her own mother. So King Charles stepped into the fray, didn't he? He walked her down the aisle, and she, hasn't got the decency to turn up to his coronation?
Oh, it's an extraordinary business. The whole thing is extraordinary. But if you look at life through the prism of the Sussexes' view, remember that they want to be in control the entire time. They want to set the narrative. They've been desperately destructive after they stepped down as senior working royals. Oprah, the Netflix documentary, most particularly Harry's memoir Spare, though conspicuously Meghan wasn't seen promoting that, a curious business. I mean, she's looking forward, no doubt, to being a woman of vision. Feminist icon Gloria Steinem is backing her for that award in May. What she should do, in my opinion, is to think up something constructive that does not involve criticising the royal family and does involve using such talents as she has. She's restarting her blog, The Tig, I understand. I mean, that is somewhat imaginative, or used to be. Why doesn't she develop that? Or take a political role if she feels that that is where her future lies. But I agree, of course she should, in theory, be at the coronation, but this is the excuse, and there's a compromise they've worked out, so at least the palace can now prepare for it.
And, Richard, there's going to be a bit of a blink-and-you'll-miss-it trip from Harry as well, won't there? He's not going to be on the balcony, we believe. We might not even be following in the, what would you call it, cortege behind. And he won't be kneeling in front of King Charles during the ceremony. Only his son, his eldest son will be doing that. Is that right?
Yes, and the homage at the actual ceremony, it's been reported, we haven't seen the official documents on this, but it's been reported that it will be only the Prince of Wales, who will be King Charles's liege man of life and limb, and the other royal dukes won't have a role, or so it's again been reported. Certainly Andrew won't have one, there's no doubt about that. And what I think we'll see is a changed ceremony, but in its essence, the ritual is very meaningful, and of course it will be a fantastic spectacle. This wasn't something that the Sussexes could dare miss when they had to be represented at it, because after all, the only work they get so far, or the major part of it, is because they're members of the royal family.
Exactly.
From that point of view, to miss the coronation, you just couldn't. That's why he's here. And yes, he knows how important it is to his father, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wonder what Meghan will really be genuinely feeling about all of this. All of the utter guff about how she's going to spend time being a mother and a feminist icon. I'm yet to see what she's particularly done for women or anything like that at all. And that remains to be seen, doesn't it? But the reality is now, though, that she is all but ostracised from royal events. She could have had it all, couldn't she? She could have been the little princess that she'd grown up wanting to be, and actually now she's not.
Well, you're quite right. There is absolutely no doubt.
Richard, sorry about this. Sorry to cut across you. I've got to interrupt you for a man who's even more important than you, Richard. Joe Biden, the President of the United States, is talking at the Irish Parliament building now. Let's go. Let's take it. I believe he's there. In just a second, we'll see Joe Biden. Oh, there we go. He's walking into the Irish Parliament building now. So there we go. He's going to be greeting both houses and doing a joint address to them. He's walking up the stairs. And this is, of course, on his historic visit to Ireland. And it is actually genuinely historic as well. That word gets wheeled out rather a lot, doesn't it? But it is, because he's the first US president to be doing a speech at the joint houses since JFK. And it is a remarkable thing, really. He's been pressing the flesh, hasn't he? He's been out and about quite a lot today. He met Leo Varadkar. It's also notable that this address, which we're going to see at some point, was due to take place at around 3:45. We are now approaching 5:45. And one of the reasons behind that, frankly, is because, really, Joe Biden has, apparently anyway, just been enjoying himself a bit too much. He's been pressing the flesh. He's been meeting people. He's been out meeting Leo Varadkar, as I've said, and chatting away to people. One thing that I will say is interesting is that there were all of the various different representatives from Northern Ireland invited to meet Joe Biden now as we see him about to enter the Parliament building proper, the chamber in the Irish Parliament. But only Jeffrey Donaldson, Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, the DUP leader, has declined an invitation to this address. And, of course, the DUP are blocking the power sharing at Stormont at the moment over the Windsor framework, and Joe Biden has been very, very strong on this. He's saying that he wants to get back at it. And I tell you what, I'm just going to stop talking and listen to this applause as Joe Biden walks in now. Oh, I believe we can't listen to the applause. OK, so Joe Biden is walking into that chamber building there. Rapturous applause, standing ovation, as one would imagine. And he's going to take to the podium and give his incredibly long-awaited speech, not just by the people of Ireland, but also newsreaders everywhere who have been waiting for this now for 2 hours. Senior people there greeting him. And I think it's fair to say that what he's going to talk about a lot is his Irish roots. He's been talking about his Irish roots almost non-stop since his trip there to Ireland began, and he is approaching the podium now in Dublin at the Irish Parliament. And it's interesting as well, because in that building as well, one of the key rooms was used as the model for the Oval Office. We might feel doubly at home because he is in his place of his ancestral history, and of course as well in a place that was helped model the actual White House. Joe Biden sitting now in the Irish Parliament building. I'm gonna just stop, I think, and let's hear what goes on in there live, shall we?
Start. It's not somebody's.
The Irish Parliament, which no doubt will be rather annoying for everybody concerned. But there were talks of nervousness from Joe Biden, actually.
President Biden.
It's getting underway now. Let's take
Mr. Ryan, opposition party and group leaders, Secretaries of State Blinken and Vilsack, members of Congress, ambassadors, members of both houses, MEPs, MLAs, MPs, members of the Biden family and distinguished guests. And I think I must mention somebody else, Mr. President, because it's just come to my attention that a very young observer is in attendance here today, and that is the daughter of Senator Rebecca Moynihan, her infant daughter Margot. And I do suspect that Margot's attendance here will go down in family folklore for many years to come. Uachtar an Biden tá fáilte mór rót go teach lainn. Unad our Parliaments náisiúnta. Is é lá stairiúil súntasach agus lá mór bród dúin go léir an lá seo. President Biden, you are most welcome to Leinster House, the home of our national parliament. This is a very proud and historic day for us all. It is a day we have looked forward to since your election as the 46th President of the United States just over 2 years ago. Today, you do us the honour of addressing our joint sitting. It's the fourth time the Houses have been addressed by a US President. Almost 60 years ago, on the 28th of June 1963, in a very different world and a very different Ireland, the late President John F. Kennedy addressed the Houses and inspired our people. It is particularly fitting, therefore, that you should address us so close to that important anniversary. Today we acknowledge the presence in Ireland of his grandnephew, Joseph Kennedy III, the new US economic envoy to Northern Ireland, and we wish him every success in the important role of supporting peace and prosperity that you have assigned to him. Now, Mr. President, while all previous presidential addresses have been of major significance, today's is like no other, because amongst an extensive list of distinguished guests, we are joined here in the Dáil today by our former illustrious President, Mary McAleese, former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern, a key architect of the Good Friday Agreement, former Taoiseach Enda Kenny, a fellow Mayo man and a close personal friend, we know, of yours. Joining us also is the former president of Sinn Féin and a former member of this House, Gerry Adams, who played such a key role in the Good Friday Agreement negotiations. And from north of the border, we also welcome Alex Maskey, Speaker of the Northern Assembly, which I'm sure you would have liked to have been able to address, Michelle O'Neill, the Northern Leader of Sinn Féin, Colm Eastwood, Member of Parliament, Leader of the SDLP and a successor to the great John Hume, Nobel Peace Laureate, and an initiator of the Good Friday Peace Agreement, and Naomi Long, Leader of the very progressive and growing Alliance Party. I extend a special welcome also to Miss Mary Heaney, whose late husband, Seamus Heaney, is a favourite poet of yours, Mr. President, and of ours also. And a Nobel Prize winner and one of our great literary treasures. Seamus would have been 84 today, and I'm sure he is looking down on us with his glasses nestled between his fingers and a hint of a smile on his face. From the diplomatic corps, I warmly welcome the US Ambassador, Claire Cronin. Thank you for sending her to us. And her Irish counterpart, in Washington, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason, one of the very best of of our diplomats. These two outstanding women have done our two countries proud. We are joined too by the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, the Moroccan Ambassador to Ireland, the representative of the European Commission and Parliament, Jonathan Claridge and Fionnuala Croker, our dear neighbour and friend, Ambassador Paul Johnson of the United Kingdom. But may I extend a very special and warm welcome to the much admired Ukrainian ambassador to Ireland, someone who has become incredibly well known to all of us, Larissa Garasko, who above all else represents the nearly 80,000 displaced Ukrainian citizens now resident in Ireland.
OK, all right, so look, what you're listening there to is, of course, the opening, very long-winded introduction, followed by numerous rounds of applause in the Irish Parliament as we await to hear from Joe Biden. We'll go back to that when Joe Biden actually starts talking. I think Michelle Dewberry is alongside me now. And you're going to be coming people's way for the next hour after this. Look, what do you make of this? I mean, do you care about Biden in Ireland?
Oh, you're asking the wrong person, because when I say no, I'll get into trouble. So I'll say yes. Do I care? I care more about domestic issues, should I say here, which is what I will be covering on my show tonight. Well, I want to talk to people about the house, the car and the food.
Oh, so can't get much more domestic than that.
Yeah, all of the key matters is what I want to get into tonight. But yeah, of course, I will be reflecting on this, not least because one of my panel tonight, he is a dual citizen, I think, Irish passport holder, so he's certainly be interested in that. Divided opinions when it comes to Biden on my panel tonight. Probably like anyone, though, if you're listening, not watching the screen, I was sitting watching with bated breath to see whether or not there's going to be any trips on the stairs,
I was.
any stumbles, and if you wasn't watching, you didn't know what happened, I can report that there were none.
There were none.
He made it safely.
Well, he has had one gaff, to be fair, the old black and tan.
The rugby one.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, the rugby one. Oh, I don't know, though.
Look, I just wonder, well, you know, he dines out on his Irish roots, doesn't he, far too often, in my view. And I actually think it's quite offensive, to be honest with you. When you think I think it's offensive when you think about the shared history that Britain has got and Northern Ireland has got with America.
Yeah.
And the fact that Joe Biden's great-great-great-grandfather from both his mother's side of the family may well be Irish. One of them moved to America in 1851. I mean, a lot has happened since then, you know. And Britain and Brits have fought toe-to-toe alongside Americans in world wars. I'm not exactly sure. It might be worth noting what the Republic of Ireland's involvement in.
Yes,
certainly one of those wars was.
But then the cynic might say that there's a lot of... he was alluding to it earlier on, I think, the amount of Irish Americans, a lot of votes to be won, isn't there, by making a nod to that heritage.
Of course, absolutely. But I just think that's a little bit on the nose. But there we go. And he's spent a lot more time in the Republic than he has in Northern Ireland. And if you are just joining us now, what we are waiting for is Joe Biden to stand up and talk at the Irish Parliament. He's been receiving numerous different rounds of applause there, and just kind of been doing the big parliamentary and presidential trip, hasn't he? And he is in their National Parliament building. He's going to begin his address very, very shortly. And there we go. So, Michelle, you are going to be focusing not just on this, of course, but also on various domestic issues. You mentioned, what was it? Food, cars and houses, was it?
Yeah, your house, your car and your grub. Those three issues, key issues that I want to tackle tonight. I want to talk about whether or not we should pay people, basically, to downsize their property and look at stamp duty as well as a bigger issue. Your cars, your whole kind of ULEZ and your clean airs, and Sadiq Khan and a judicial review looking at how he's been expanding ULEZ and whether or not it's all been above board and stuff. I want to talk about food. Should we be kind of independent as a nation when it comes to being self-sufficient and growing our own? What would that look like? And, of course, the whole Biden thing. We shall get into that, as well as gripping this, isn't it? You're sitting at home watching it.
I mean, bearing in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that this was all supposed to have started 2 hours ago, and obviously Joe Biden's been enjoying himself around the Republic of Ireland for a long time now, meeting up with Leo Varadkar and a few other people as well, and then gradually making his way towards the Irish Parliament, where we await to hear from him very, very shortly. And so we'll be bringing that to you live here on GB News. But yeah, he is going to address that joint session of the Irish Parliament. He's the first US president to do so since 1995, which was before the Good Friday Agreement was signed. Yeah, it was remarkable, really. His officials have spoken of their nervousness, though, because he doesn't want to go off script. And they're hoping to avoid another gaffe. It's the old black and tans gaffe. And bearing in mind that he's hinted that he might run again, Michelle, based on things that we've seen, and we have had quite a close look at him, especially in the last couple of days, do you think he should run again?
Do you know, you're probably going to think I'm a bit mean, but when I do watch these screens, and OK, yeah, he does look, you know, reasonably well, I do think he is, you know, what, he's 80 or so now, and it does make me kind of think, do you need to have an upper age cap, really, when you can serve in public office?
I think it's terrible for democracy because people will turn out under the pretence of voting for Joe Biden. There's no way you're telling me he's running the country.
Well, who do you think is then?
It'll be people behind the scenes, won't it? It'll be you know, key advisors, etc. I mean, I get that everybody has key advisors and everyone has, you know, a cabinet and all of this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that, but at the same time, I really, you would like to assume maybe that your leader, whether it's a prime minister or president, has visibly got their hand on the tiller, and I remain unconvinced that Joe Biden
But then
does.
I guess on the flip side, if someone is of a vintage, shall we say?
Of a vintage?
Yeah, if someone is of a vintage.
Fantastic.
They might look at Joe Biden and think, what a role model, what an inspiration. Don't write us kind of vintage viewers off. We've got a lot in the tank. I remember one of my viewers actually saying that to me on one of my live shows. She was saying she would run rings around the youngsters. So I think actually...
I'm sure, yeah.
I don't know. Are you an older viewer or listener? Do you look at him and think, yeah, he's my role model. I can achieve anything.
Is Biden a bit of you?
Bit of you.
Is he a bit of you? That's
Is
what
he?
that's what we're going to be going for there. And to get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, Joe Biden is getting to his feet, which I would imagine means that we're going to be hearing from him shortly. Let's go back now to the Irish Parliament building.
Well, Mom, you said it would happen. And Margot, I apologize to you, little baby girl. The idea you're subject to hearing a President of the United States have to deliver a policy speech is as bad as all my children have had been put through. Speaking to my children, my son Hunter's with me, and my best friend in the world, my sister Valerie's with me today. And I want them to... As the proud son of Catherine Eugenia Finnegan Biden, well, you knew I'd be coming. Speaker, Chair, Taoiseachs, all, and Deputy Prime Minister, TDs, Senators, people of Ireland, it's so good to be back in Ireland. If you forgive the poor attempt at Irish, Táimé Seo Bhaile, I'm at home. I only wish I could stay longer. But I always have a little bit of Ireland close by, even when I'm in Washington. In the Oval Office, I have the rugby ball signed by the Irish rugby team, the ball the team played when they beat the All Blacks in Dublin in 2021. By the way, my cousin, one of Ireland's greatest rugby stars, Rob Kearney, brought it to D.C. on St. Patrick's Day in 2022 to give me. And I didn't play rugby except when I was out of law school. And I didn't play it very well. We played in a rugby club. But I did play American football and a few other sports. But I realized that, you know, you guys are all nuts. But the interesting thing is, I'd rather have my children playing rugby now for health reasons than I would have them playing football. Fewer people get hurt playing rugby, and you have no equipment. You have 280-pound guys like we do, and you just don't hit each other in the head very often. And but anyway, all kidding aside, in 2016, I came to Ireland as vice president, bringing most of my family with me. My sister Valerie, my brother Jimmy, my daughter, and my 5 granddaughters and grandchildren. My granddaughters are crazy about me, I might add, because I talk to them every single day. I send them a note. Together, we explored our family history, visiting the Cooley Peninsula, where the Finnegans' ancestors earned their living on land and in sea. and walking the streets of Ballina, where my great-great-great-grandfather Blewett lived with his family before relocating in 1851, eventually settling in my hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania. Yesterday, I returned to County Louth, where I toured the Collingford Castle, likely one of the last glimpses of Ireland my Finnegan ancestors saw as they gazed on their way out in what in those days was referred to as a coffin ship. And they sailed out of Newry in 1850. I wasn't going to say this, but I'll say it anyway. The idea was, I later learned from the Irish Times, they did a little background check, and my good friend Barack Obama, and he is my good friend, his grandfather was a shoemaker like mine, sailed 5 weeks earlier from the same port. The idea they both sailed for a new life and thought their grandchildren, their great-great-grandsons would both be president, I think is really a little bit of Irish malarkey. But it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Tomorrow, I'll also revisit County Mayo and remember the history and hope and the heartbreak my Blewett ancestors must have felt leaving their beloved homeland to begin their new lives in America. I say all this not to wax poetic about bygone days, but because of the story of my family's journey and those who left and those who stayed is emblematic of the stories of so many Irish and American families, not just Irish-American families. And these stories are the very heart of what binds Ireland and America together. They speak to a history defined by our dreams. They speak to a present written by our shared responsibility. And they speak to a future poised for unlimited shared possibilities. So today, I'd like to reflect on the enduring strength of the connections between Ireland and the United States, a partnership for the ages. It begins in our shared history, dating back to the very founding of the United States. The Irish hearts that helped kindle the torch of liberty in my country and fire its revolutionary spirit. The Irish blood from across this island that was willingly given for my country's independence. The Irish hands that laid the foundations of a new kind of future, one from the bottom up and the middle out, one built on freedom. You know, the great waves of immigration that brought our ancestors to the United States in succeeding decades carried millions more Irishmen across the sea. Most of them arrived a little more than with hope in their hearts and strength in their dreams and beautiful memories of an emerald green isle, a home they would never fully leave behind. I've never met an Irishman in America who doesn't think he will hope he can see.
Hello there, I am Michelle Dewberry. You've just been watching, listening to Joe Biden there, addressing the Irish Parliament. Worry not, we will have all the best bits, all the highlights of his speech, bringing that live to you. I also, in the next hour, want to talk to you about your house, your car and your food. Don't go anywhere, but in the meantime, let's bring ourselves up to speed, shall we, with the goings-on with Polly Middlehurst.
And everybody shows.
Thanks very much. We can bring you the latest news now. And of course, Joe Biden is currently in the United States. President of the United States is in the Republic of Ireland, of course, today, and he has been meeting with the Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and watching a display of Gaelic games with young people who have been showing him a demonstration of hurling. And just now, we have seen a standing ovation inside the Irish